All right. In this video, we're going to do a X Town Hall, which is going to be about to NAR or not to NAR. It's with Michael Scott on the poll that he just ran with the community, which is very even Steven on whether or not the NAR is a good idea or not a good idea. And the purpose of this X panel is just to do a introduction to a speakers panel of getting feedback of who would be great to hear both sides, because we got a really very even thing. You got almost 50-50. It's close. And so it'd be great to get 55 people from one side, 5 people from another, set a date or a couple dates, and who are going to be the best people to do that from both sides of the fence. And so that's really what this is about, not just go out and debate the whole thing, but we're definitely going to introduction about what it's all about. So, all right, so let's get started. I did start the recording. And Michael, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you.
I'm doing excellent, Gavin. I appreciate you setting this up.
Yeah,
I think
thank
it's
you.
worthwhile. It certainly warrants a open dialogue, and I think that having the community come together to better understand how this kind of helps, and or what are some opportunities to either clarify or maybe have some experts or folks from, let's say, the BSV Association or some other industry key players, partners, etc. The gorilla pools of the world, the miners, etc., who kind of have some skin in the game to better understand how they view things. I think would kind of just be very educational and informative for the community as a whole.
Nice. Okay, so first of all, feel free to raise your hand or what request on Casey. You already have Michael, you do too. So bring them up. I have a little bit of an issue on my thing, and for some reason I'm not seeing the request. So you guys got it. And then if anybody wants to jump up, so that's the whole thing, is just to come up here and jump up on stage, and let's break this down as to okay, Michael, before we go into that, can we just do a little background on what the NAR is for everybody? What is it and what's going on?
So essentially this is and I don't know exactly if it's been either proposed, if it's already being implemented, adhered to, etc. I'd like kind of clarification and confirmation from folks who are in the know to maybe clarify that, because for me it's relatively new, being that it was introduced this year. And when I say relatively new, I'm talking within 2024. Obviously it's been out there since I think March or even earlier than that, and I think most folks are kind of of the position that they're it's business as usual, right? And so I think that was my first reaction was, hey, this is just kind of another, layer to kind of help nodes stay honest and for miners to kind of cooperate and act within the law, et cetera. I think as you peel back the onion a little bit, there's definitely some concerns festering from various folks, both just formally, informally, as you're kind of having conversations. I've definitely heard some critiques of the NAR. And then personally, as I kind of dove into it a little bit, some things stood out that were a little concerning. So I would encourage us to have an open mind as far as, hey, what are some of the benefits? How can we leverage this to differentiate the BSV blockchain? I think everyone has good intentions overall, and so that's really the goal of me participating in the discussion.
Nice. All right, so let me just give a little quick my understanding of the NAR. And again, today's not the full-on debate, so let's try to do our best to keep it limited on the way of like the for or against argument, right? Because we want to intro that, but today isn't that. It's about just like who are the best people to talk about it. Now let me just see the way I understand it. When I haven't read it since it came out, and I wrote a paper on it. I sent it to a couple friends, my analysis on it. And I actually, the way I understand it is this, is basically we've got they took the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, and the NAR is implementing rules to set up what's called an administrative, it's like basically an administrative remedy. It's a remedy that can happen outside of court through these rules, operating under the what's called the custody or the supervision of the Bitcoin Association. And so the concept is if there's a dispute or a dishonest node, and the whole theory was, and back in 2021, I think it was 2021, there was a node or a person that was doing fake transactions on the network. They were screwing up the network, and those transactions caused a big problem, and it could have caused damage to a lot of people and hurt a lot of people. So the idea is to prevent that from happening, so that these rules can prevent that from ever happening, and keep the network honest and compliance with the white paper. And if there is a dispute and somebody doesn't like it, one of the nodes, well, they have rules to follow to where they can go to arbitration in court or an arbitration judge in Switzerland and say, hey, I disagree with this. I don't like what you're doing on this particular rule, and you shouldn't have done this, or you should be doing this. They can go to arbitration before they go to court. So apparently that's the way I understand it. It's rules and it's procedures that people can follow to, to basically get things done and make sure that nodes stay honest. That's my basic understanding. So maybe Brett, you want to jump in and tell us what you think about it? What the NAR is. You just joined us. Be great to.
Hey everybody, how you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
Doing awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for putting together the space, for inviting me up to speak, and Michael, thanks so much for bringing up the topic for discussion. Happy
and Michael
to see
did
it.
a poll, Brett, and so the reason I did this was we did this. Sorry to I don't interrupt you, but the reason it's important is because he just did this poll, and I saw it yesterday, and I contacted him. Michael was even, almost even. So it's not a landslide one way or the other, and that's why today is about what's the NAR. How does it work? And then who are going to be the best speakers to do this panel representing both sides of the argument?
Yeah, well, I can speak for, the BA side. The best person to bring up is definitely Connor Murray. He is also, one of the best people to just discuss on anything related to Bitcoin in general. So, that's one of the that's who my vote would be to bring up. Oh, Connor is also the director of the stewardship value stream for the association. So, the NAR is really built out of the scope of Connor's work, essentially.
Okay, Brett, what is the NAR for a fifth grader?
Yeah, so NAR stands for Network Access Rules, and it's oftentimes associated with, sometimes people say DAR, which stands for Digital Asset Recovery. They are definitely different, but they relate. And I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I'm just speaking as I understand it. I am a fifth grader. That's how we'll put it. So consider me just a fifth grader in this. But digital asset recovery. This is something that is key to the BSV approach in a lot of things. That the blockchain is a distributed network, and the fact that it's a distributed network, is really important in the sense that there isn't a central authority under whom the mechanics of the chain are completely subject to. The main problem, and what blockchain and Bitcoin solves, and I think this extends beyond just a technological solution. I really believe that this is a philosophical solution to the problem of centralized command. And not to get too philosophical about this, but I think you even see remnants of this concept of distributed governance in the entire concept of kind of like a America, let's just say, for this, for lack of a better example, in the sense that you don't have a single kind of top-down perspective on how the country is to be run. You have a balance of power between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches of the government, right? So the concept is that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So instead of having a single entity under which all actions, because the network is so valuable and so important to and truth ends up always being kind of corruptible when it's managed by a single entity. Now you distribute the load of that truth across a variety of partners, of agents on the network, and then it's the collective efforts of those agents on the network to serve the greater good that allows for the greater good to actually emerge, as opposed to, you know, and this is again philosophical in terms of how I perceive this stuff, but you know, when the greater good is under the perspective or the single vantage point of a single entity, it invariably, even if it's not on purpose, even if that entity ends up being, you know, a entity that has, you know, best of intentions, et cetera, all of these things, you still have the propensity for there to be a tilting of the system in such a way as it favors that the view of that vantage point. Now, you know, again, I'm getting philosophical about this, but I truly strongly believe this is one of my favorite and most passionate subjects. You know, if you look at, you know, examples of Bitcoin that I think have failed, you could for example, look at BTC. And BTC has this, you know, first of all, Bitcoin itself is a protection against this concept of Sybil attacks, this concept of, you know, you could even make an example or make a parallel between might makes right. So if we have the view and opinion of, you know, many soft nodes, and they all think that these that this protocol should be changed in this particular way, et cetera, then we have the ability to sort of fork the honest network off of the network, basically by ignoring, by taking a group of Sybil actors. Sybil actors would be kind of like sock puppets, or the example of using multiple IP addresses to signal or to flag the network rules that are that we wish to see followed, right? And we've seen that in the example of BTC, this system has sort of been put into place. That these rules have been updated beyond to extend beyond the architecture, the initial architecture of Bitcoin, in such a way as you know, the concept of proof of work itself as the mechanism for the administration of the network ends up getting undermined. So, you know, I think, and this is you know, one of the problems that some people have with the network access rules is they're saying, okay, well, you know, we can understand that BTC and its governance model has sort of failed Bitcoin because you know, they have co-opted the network and they've distorted what its functions are. Bitcoin has implicit built-in functions for its own regulation and of you know, of truth, of ensuring, you know, that X rule gets followed over and above Y rule that's being proposed, et cetera, and that system is proof of work. And by sort of forking the network with these different rule sets, we've effectively, you know, made it into a show of a, you know, the exact thing that Bitcoin was supposed to replace, which is the, you know, the Sybil attacks redeciding what network rules we live by. And this is sort of like there's again parallels to this in terms of the liberty that America represents, and, you know, its governance model, and being able to be, you know, distributed across multiple bodies, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, right? We have the same sort of problem where we say, okay, well, we've set up these institutions not because we bow to them and we think that, okay, if the judicial system tells me that I should drink arsenic or something like that, I'm just going to do it, right? Because whatever the judicial system or whatever the executive branch says, that must be truth, right? We don't set these institutions or these we don't create this body so that we can basically bow to it and do whatever it says. We do it because we are imperfect people, and because in our own imperfections we understand that that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we are doing our best effort as possible to make sure that at least it's being distributed across a wide enough load. So that's some of the concerns that people have with the network access rules, where they're saying, okay, well, wait a second, the whole point of Bitcoin and the whole point of proof of work as a governance model is that we don't need an institution like the BSV Association or whatever to come along and say, hey, this is a violation of these network access rules, and therefore your proof of work is no longer going to be relevant in terms of the, you know, what you're deciding to be as the honest chain tip. And I think that some of that stuff, first of all, is really important, right? We need ways to, as we set up these mechanisms and build these systems in place that are being put there again in for the purposes of promoting our liberty, promoting our freedom, et cetera. We also need to be vigilant, right? And same with the system of that America has installed in terms of its governance model, right? Just because we have these systems in place doesn't mean that they're infallible or that we should always obey them or abide by them, et cetera, right? We need to always be watching them. However, like I can pause there because I don't want to go too deeply. That's just a little intro in terms of my my feelings about this subject. But
nice. Okay, so it sounds like
Yeah,
go ahead, Michael.
if I could just touch on that, Brett, I
Murray
totally
is your
agree.
vote as one of the guys. Brett, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was going to say, I think it's a really good, analogy to kind of view it through is, with the checks and balances of the U.S. government, for example. So just kind of extrapolating from that thought, and I'm doing this not because I don't know the answer, but just maybe to kind of help explain to kind of your average listener. Would you assume that in that example, we know that Reddit has been co-opted for the past, decade plus, and there's been heavy censorship that has, tilted kind of the thought leadership as well as the opinions you're allowed to have towards, one side, which directly impacted, forks that happened, development initiatives, et cetera. Would you kind of use the miners, in that analogy as kind of that central point of failure, Brett? Just so kind of everyone understands, the miners kind of assuming.
And before you go to that,
power.
Brett, I want anybody else who wants to jump back up on stage, feel free to request. You have co-host, right, Michael? If I don't see him, I've got an error on my screen. Please add them. I want people's opinion as to who they want on the panel. So go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, exactly. That's correct. It is the miners, aka the nodes, and the nodes are, it's up to the nodes to be vigilant for the network. It's up to them to ensure that they're only accepting honest blocks. And we have to really understand too that this is an extremely complicated and nuanced topic, and obviously everyone that's in this discussion that's listening right now is probably very well qualified to really deeply explore it, unpack it, and expand on it, right? But it's also important to remember that we're talking about really splitting hairs in terms of, okay, how, first of all, 99.999% of people have never even heard of a node, don't know what it is, don't know why it's relevant, and all of this stuff. But now it's not just, okay, what is a node and how is it relevant, but it's also, how is my specific definition of a node and your specific definition of a node really, which one is more faithful to the white paper? And, and again, we're going down to this layer these are fundamental, issues that really affect truth and really affect our ability to properly chronicle our history as a species and all this stuff. But it's at such a technical level that really, sometimes it helps to use these philosophical concepts like the, checks and balances of the government, et cetera, because it's like, okay, I don't necessarily know everything and understand everything about network topology and how nodes communicate with each other and what proof of work is, whether it's a signal or whether it's a, an indicator or actually represents some sort of data in itself, et cetera, right? You can kind of move that aside and just say hey, what it's like to have difficulties when it comes to how information is trafficked and managed and all of this stuff, right? While at the same time, this concept of these difficulties, they in some ways represent opportunities, because it's only, on the one hand, and not to get too deep into this, but on the one hand, although there are problems specifically with the way that America is governed and things like this, right? But when you compare it to some other nations, et cetera, it's like, okay, well, I'll take the problems of the American system, over and above the problems of this system or that system, right? Because and this is just naturally how history works. It's like we always develop new mechanisms. In fact, I saw a quote the other day that I really thought was brilliant. It said that our ethics evolve as our technology evolves. I'd never really thought about it that way, but I think it's what when we're talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about the cutting edge of technology. But it's when you think about that sentence, that our ethics evolve as our technology evolves, then you understand that we're not just talking about the cutting edge of technology. We're also talking about the cutting edge of liberty itself, of how we govern, how we assign value to information, how we treat each other, and so, when an institution like the BSV Association comes along and says, hey, this is going to be a fundamental component of, the network itself. It's going to be our network rules. It's right. It's like, it's not like the community's network rules. It's not like, hey, like, Satoshi's network rules or whatever. This is the association's network rules. It's natural for people to say, like, wait a second, hold on. Why are these your network rules, right? Let's unpack that and explore that. In the same way that, if like, we were all living in the same town and all of a sudden the mayor or something said like, hey, now these are the mayor's rules for like what, religion you can celebrate or what holidays you're allowed to celebrate, then people would have a natural right to be like, wait a second, hold on, what is actually in these rules, and how do they relate to me? How do they pretend to me? And so I think it's a healthy thing to be skeptical and and it's always in the pursuit and the efforts of getting closer and getting rawer to the cutting edge of ethics in the world today.
This is a really great topic. So Michael, why don't you want to just comment on that and back on the go ahead, Michael.
I Brett, I really look up to kind of your perspective, and I think everything you say is so eloquent, and I agree with everything, honestly. And so definitely echo those sentiments. I think as I look at things, from a couple different lenses, right? So just being kind of a Bitcoin advocate and really following kind of the true value add, as well as business proposition that Bitcoin ultimately is looking to solve, right? I think to me that's the most important reason that I'm here. It's not necessarily to make money or anything else, or kind of get a job or whatnot. So I look at it from, I try and stay as unbiased and impartial as possible, and so that's kind of where that perspective comes in. The other is just from a professional standpoint, being in the IT industry for over 10 years, working at the largest distributors, tech companies, implementers, right, working with government contracts. I do have kind of a breadth of experience just from a general IT standpoint. So some of these things that I was reading within the NAR did kind of raise a couple red flags, which again I think it's ultimately probably just kind of checking a box here and there, or maybe some compliance. And so that's I think part of what we want to make sure everyone understands, right? Because otherwise it could introduce some FUD, like from either internally or externally, right, from supporters and the like, as well as kind of prevent maybe some innovation that could be taking place. As an example, like I said, I'm not involved with any BSV company or project from kind of like a full-time perspective, but have been trying to tinker, learn, develop, etc. more over the past couple of years. I did, spin up a node recently. I've invested over $1,000 US on that particular kind of hobby side project. So again, not
node,
really.
or what type of node?
Full node.
Okay.
For BSV. Yep. And the goal there was just to really understand kind of, hey, what the other thing I should preface is part of why I'm so excited about Satoshi's vision is really from a scaling perspective, right? So I definitely understand the need for high performance compute, enterprise grade servers, right? And kind of a commercialization approach in terms of businesses anchoring the network, as opposed to kind of like hobbyist, Raspberry Pis, right? So I'm totally aligned with Craig on that end, and just in general, I'm always going to defer to him, right? And so part of what the NAR, for me, just looking into it, it's kind of a bit out of nowhere from a standpoint of, I think most people building and or invested and or following BSV, we were all pretty cool with like how it worked, right? So I don't think I don't think anyone was asking for necessarily some of these changes. So I just,
Michael, let me,
Yep.
you've been around obviously a long time. So what happened in 2021? Because that, when I met with Connor and interviewed him, he said that he explained it, that there was a big problem in 2021 where somebody had created fake transactions. Can you walk us through that?
so I don't, yeah, I would like to know, is that kind of the double spend? I know there was like some people claim, oh, you know, BSV had a double spend that happened, and then my understanding is it didn't actually happen. So I would like to know, because that's the first time I've heard of that being referenced as kind of like an issue that prompted, you know, looking at.
Brett would know
um,
more about it than I do if you want to talk about it, Brett. But the way I understand, and basically, I understand that someone had created transactions and they were not valid transactions; they were fake transactions.
Was
Brett,
it an adversarial, do we know, or was it maybe just like a wash trading, or do we know exactly the
Yeah.
details?
Yeah, I can speak on this. So, and this is, you know, we talk about, again, a lot of the really the value and the bright spots in BSV's history, et cetera, and you know, going all the way back to, you know, the original block being mined back in 2009, and you know, maybe not one of the moments that, you know, we could look at with a magnifying glass, and even, you know, again, not trying to sugarcoat anything, but just like even in, you know, even the person with the most rose-colored sunglasses when it comes to BSV might be like, yeah, but that what's going on with that specific situation? So yeah, the topic or the situation was a you know, first.
1 second. Reconnect.
Right, because it's like, hey, you know, these rules are very clear and simple to me, you know, so I'm going to lay them out, and if you want Bitcoin, then basically, like, it's your obligation to maintain these rules, you know, but it's like one of those things where two people can look at the same information and come away with different conclusions. So different people can look at that white paper and say, well, I'm not seeing exactly where Satoshi is saying that this specific thing or this specific thing, and you know, and oftentimes we find too that you know, false information or information that's very easy to be manipulated can be, you know, overwhelmingly profitable, right? It can be really profitable to have a promotion mechanism for false information, right? Because of course there's oftentimes vested interest to covering up certain information and making it harder to have a, you know, a distributed network that bears the load of an honest, truthful, you know, network. And you know, like, again, I'm not trying to read too into it in terms of the importance of BSV, but I think you can make the argument that BSV is that it is like a truth machine or a truth network. And
And Brett, so in 2021 was it? What in basic, like what happened exactly? Like the guy, a node or something, made fake transactions. I mean, I'm
no,
trying to understand. And so
yeah, sorry. I was trying to paint the picture that
I'm sorry,
Satoshi
yeah.
wouldn't have envisioned that the Truth Network would have such a minority of the hash power. But effectively, because it has such a minority of the hash power, it became really easy to propagate this basically alternate history, and that alternate history is about transactions, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, it's just that's sort of like a euphemism, right? It's an alternate history of transactions, but it's also the concept of an alternate history of other types of truth as well, right? And the use of a concerted private interest to publish and push for alternate information and alternate history that you know, like that subverts the honest network. And one of the reasons why Bitcoin and BSV is so successful is because it takes this process, this data layer of information processing, and sort of automates it. It just says, hey, you know, like, if you're the longest chain, then we will basically like start working on your chain, right? And so sometimes I use this example of, but what if the honest chain was rewritten from scratch from the very beginning of history, so that Hal Finney back in 2009 in block 9 or whatever never even got those original 10 Bitcoins, right? And just rewrite the history. And if you have enough hash power, then would you, as an honest node on the network, fork the rest of the history of the network and just say, hey, this one has more hash power, so this is now the honest history? There's two ways of looking at that, right? Because on the one hand, you say, well, proof of work is the way that we measure the chain length. And so if this one has more proof of work attached to it, then de facto by default, that is the honest chain tip. But at the same time, the hash power and the amount of hash that's put on the chain as a leading edge to signal the honest efforts of the network is really takes at a fundamental layer that the agents on the network are really trying in earnest to preserve and provide the history of the network, and they wouldn't be trying to use the mechanism of the network, which is the hash power, to subvert the network itself. And so that's what we saw in 2021. We saw an agent that came on the network that was able to try to use the mechanism of the nodes to use proof of work to determine, whether or not a chain is honest or not, and they use it to push a dishonest chain tip by mining in secret. So they ended up mining something like 200 blocks or something like that. So well beyond the the Coinbase is being spendable, and then they just pushed it all at once. And so the nodes on the network, again, what makes us be able to use these minimal hundredth of a thousandth of a cent fees, these 10,000th of a cent fees, etc. The mechanism by which we're enabling that with this use of proof of work, this computerization essentially of the mechanism of truth determination, and it was being used to exploit, to try to publish and push a clearly false narrative or a clearly manipulated narrative, and the purpose was to double spend coins. So one of the things that Satoshi
double
said,
spending coins. That's wow.
Yeah. So one of the things Satoshi said in the white paper was, that he was, first of all, it's always possible to break any system. That's the point, is that there's no technical solution to this governance model that we're seeking, right? But it's what he envisioned and what he argued for was an economic solution. So he's saying, okay, well, maybe there is this rogue agent out there that wants to potentially publish these 200 blocks in a row, and they want to double spend $2 million or something like that. Well, it's in the agent's economic interest. If they have that amount of hash power, they should be putting it to the work of doing the good of the network, right? Just start mining blocks. If you have that much hash power, instead of using it to manipulate the chain, just use it to advance the chain and just follow the basic rules that the chain sets out. And then and basically, so it's this fundamental concept that it's not going to be a technical solution that frees us as a human people with the preservance of liberty and truth. It's going to be the economic interests of all actors on the network to contribute to the good of the network. And but at the same time, we see that when BSV is such a minority of the chain, et cetera, and also I think who knows who the real actor was that was behind that, but there's always a vested interest in making Bitcoin look bad. Say, oh, you guys want to use Bitcoin for this? No. Look, because back in 2021, I saw that they double spent, or that there was some concerns of double spending on this, that, and the other with $2 million, et cetera, on this exchange. And the point is not necessarily to actually try to double spend those coins, because it ended up failing, right? The coins were never double spent, but the point was that they get to say, hey, look, this system is flawed. You can't go on this system because back here there was potentially an exploit in it, et cetera. So there's always this concern that maybe it was really just so the point was that
vulnerable.
When Satoshi said, when he said that anyone with that much power would be economically interested in contributing it to the network rather than trying to divide the network. And naturally he wasn't foreseeing that maybe the person who was directing that agent had a much bigger fish to fry and didn't care about, the little minority chain of BSV that has been forked anyway, right? The majority of Sybil nodes have forked to the BSV, the truthful network, off. They're just like, hey, you know what? Your rules are too complicated. We'll be shitcoiners over here, but we'll be really, really wealthy shitcoiners. How about that? They've forked us off and say, so it's sort of like the last way to try to exploit the BSV as not just a network, but also as a philosophy, because it's a way of saying, hey, look, like, you can't trust economic interests,
Right.
because at the end of the day, someone that has more money than you may come along and say, hey, I don't care if I burn a lot of money to make you look bad, but I have enough money to do that. And unfortunately, there are people in the world that are willing to do that, so it's a fair point.
Very good point. So
Hey,
basically,
we
in
got
summary,
a hand up, Crypto Voyager, Gavin.
yeah, hand up with Crypto Voyager. 1 second, I'm going to go to you next. But in summary, it basically seems like in 2021 they came on the network and had some double spend transactions, and it caused a potential huge vulnerability. And that's where this stemmed up over the last 3 years.
Yeah, and I think to underscore that, I mean, I'm on board with that, and so I think, but we need to kind of be able to get the context out that, hey, we're in a brave new world where there's a fake Bitcoin known as BTC that has adversarial, folks, inside of it who are looking to, maybe exploit the network in various ways, and so this will help protect from that. So, but again, this is the first time we're kind of
Michael,
talking about that. So I think
one
it's
thing
good to
about
talk
you
about.
is I'm kind of like writing down notes, like where we can have this panel. Like we got you. I think you've done a lot of research, and you might be against it, even if you're not in principle. Would you be willing to be on the against side?
I'm just, yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like Crypto Voyager left. Yeah, I'm not like, I'm just trying to advance BSV. That's my only goal. I'm not like,
you may be against the NAR though, because we need to have 5. I mean, realistically, your poll was really good. And if you got 50% of people saying they don't want it, right? And 50 do want it. So Crypto Voyager, feel free to jump back up. Maybe you're
Crypto Voyager, go ahead.
Unmute. There we go.
Yeah, I had to step down because I couldn't hear Michael. Hi, Gavin. Hi, Brett. Brett, is he still here or is he gone?
Yeah, he's here.
Oh, I don't see him as speaker. Okay, Brett, you're still here. That's nice. Brett, I was there. I've been there since a long time. Anyway, when that happened, sadly the double spend, I missed it. I just was there when the base miner was there. Was that the same guy that also did the tried double spend? Because there was an exchange that actually said that they had a double spend, but then afterwards no money was lost. Anywho, doesn't matter. What I wanted to say is what happened then was that the BSV Association, or I can't remember exactly who, tweeted out, please follow this chain. Although that chain, again, was the one with minority hash, of the minority hash that BSV already has. Yes, it was the majority of honest nodes, but I don't know, it doesn't feel right. That's one. And on the writings of Satoshi, him saying, him, they, her, doesn't matter, saying that there is only one chain. Yes, there is only one chain, but there were some writings where he goes, it would be very inconvenient if there would be several chains.
Crypto Voyager, which side are you on?
Yes.
For or against a NAR? And if you don't want to answer that, that's fine. Then who do you think would be a good speaker for against the NAR? If you could pick a person that you believe could.
There is nobody. There is okay. I can't say nobody, but it's very difficult for somebody to put on the devil's advocate hat on, still be coherent, still talk out of with reason. That is something that in BSV is sadly lacking. Reason is going out of the door. Well, has been going out of the window in Bitcoin for a long time. So there is little reason left now in all the spaces. Am I for the NAR? It's a necessary crutch that we need in this moment of time. Gavin, have you read the book series Choose Your Own Adventure?
Can you repeat that? What's it called?
Choose Your Own Adventure. Have you ever
Choose
read
Your
that
Own
book series as a
Adventure.
kid?
Negative. What's
Yeah.
it about?
Well, okay, they're different stories. The thing is that you read the book, and then it comes to a page where the protagonist has to make a choice. Will he go left or will he go right? And then the book itself breaks the fourth wall and tells the reader, hey, do you want to break the wall to the left? Then go to page 35. Do you want to go to the right? Then go to the page 38. And then you have a lot of different ways that book can go. What I'm trying to say is that if you look at it, if you look at Bitcoin from a fourth or fifth dimensional viewpoint, I believe we are checking out right now all the different kinds of adventures that Bitcoin can do, because people are not smart enough to just think 3 pages ahead and see that something is not viable. So one could actually see this BTC right now as a giant stress test. And in 500 years in the universities, they're going to say, look, if we do small blocks, or if we go that route, we will have that problem. That adventure went into a cul-de-sac 200 years ago, yada, yada, yada. It just pains right now that BSV is the road less traveled. And somehow the NAR and the DAR are kind of like guarding rails to the BSV chain at the moment. It's sad that we actually have to have them.
Yep.
Okay, one
No,
second
it's
before
well
I
said.
send requests out to BSV Panama 1 and Roy, if you guys are welcome to join the stage if you like. And ultimately, it sounds like, just in summary, before I go back to you, Michael, you are for the NAR crypto Voyager. So, and you're not, you know, it's going to be hard for you to go against it. So we got that. And
I have accepted the NAR.
Okay.
Because I don't have the money.
And but if you could pick
and
someone,
the financial capital,
who do you think
to keep Bitcoin going without the NAR?
Who do you
Let's put it
think
this
gives
way.
the best opposition, in your
But
opinion,
real quick,
that you've heard about?
Gavin,
Go ahead, Michael.
sorry, I want to reframe, because I don't want this to be so black and white, right? I that's actually not what I want to achieve, you know, on this call. I want to reframe it a little bit and first of all, explicitly state I support the NAR, right, from a philosophical perspective. To Brett's point, okay, I have critiques of certain parts of it that I would like clarification, that kind of stand out to me as almost preventing or disincentivizing, you know, folks who would be building and creating value from even joining in the first place, because I think it's very onerous, and I think it fundamentally changes a lot of what I thought was Bitcoin and how, you know, like the unilateral contract, et cetera, you know, was supposed to work. And so it's a wrinkle. And again, I support the network access rules from a standpoint of honest nodes, honest miners acting within law. I just want to get that out of the way. I am in full support of that.
And you're running a node, so you know from experience.
Well, I'm not anymore, because, and again, I'll explain why. So, so let's get that part of the way. So I don't want it to be necessarily, are you black or white, for or against? I think there's valid concerns that just, you know, folks from either development, either, you know, folks looking to build on BSV, looking to develop an app, that I have heard of multiple instances, you know, just in direct conversations, of projects that are essentially not happening because of, you know, the NAR basically. And you know, we don't want that to happen, right? So we want to be able to uncover what is the both unspoken objection and what is kind of the spoken objection, to settle that, right? And explain, hey, this is why it's good. Here are the benefits, and or maybe bring kind of the concerns forward and not shout the folks down or call them, you know, bad actors, etc. Because I think everyone here who's been in BSV this long, you know, we're all interested in not, you know, it hasn't been monetary at this point. It's been really kind of to advance the promise of Bitcoin, right? And so that's squarely where I fall. So I want to reframe that part of it, and then also separate the DAR component, okay? Because I do vehemently oppose the DAR because
What's the
of
difference?
it's so the NAR is the network access rules, right? Which is essentially, that is actually supported in the white paper, right? In terms of honest nodes, etc. Okay, we don't have to rehash that. The DAR is essentially kind of the subcomponent in which it introduces the arbitration aspect, which I have a lot of problems with because we've already seen it play out. Okay, and so I think having
It
Ian
goes
Grigg,
against the first paragraph of the white paper.
yeah, so Ian Grigg is actually like perfect to speak on this because he's a champion of BSV, right? He has attested to Craig and the story of Satoshi. You know, he's one of the most qualified cryptologists in the world with the Ricardian contract and everything he's done, recognized by IEEE, etc. He implemented a nearly identical, you know, digital asset recovery, arbitration-based adjudication system on the EOS blockchain, right? Now, before everyone shouts down at me, oh, well, EOS sucks and it's, you know, terrible. I'm not talking about the blockchain. Let's extrapolate and separate the arbitration component of that, right? Because that is directly what caused that project to fail, was the arbitration. And
How did it work?
so essentially and I'll read a line from me and Greg. I shared actually with you, Gavin. There was a paper he wrote that kind of outlined it, and it looks great. And it actually is literally identical to what they're talking about now. And he said, hard forks and other upgrades have a defined path, and individual disputes are channeled to a place where we can resolve and get back to business. Further benefit is that most of the above governance can be handled transparently, accept and manage disputes, handle referenda, and the like. So the concept was, you know, we have to have a component within, like, kind of like Brett's saying. I definitely agree with that philosophically, is that, you know, code is not perfect, right? Humans are not perfect. So we do need a way to kind of resolve disputes that happen, right? To kind of seize, right, you know, illicit funds, etc., right? And so they introduced that concept built into their governance, that they were going to have private arbitration, you know, essentially adjudicators, etc., and a whole system set up to be able to evaluate claims that were processed and brought forward as, you know, hey, my coins were hacked, stolen, etc., which outlined in the DAR is literally the same proposal. So in the DAR, I'll just read it to you. A directive event will require a node to do all of the following, etc. Freed specified coins and unspent transaction outputs, blacklist or whitelist specific IP addresses, reassign frozen coins, invalidate specific blocks. So I think that's really the part that a lot of people lump together, right? So I think we definitely want to separate the NAR, because I think there's, you know, only kind of good things that can happen from that side of it, from really kind of this freezing aspect and arbitration component. So long story short, being that I was an investor who lost a lot of money, I'm not going to say how much, but who followed it in real time, and I can tell you unequivocally, it was nothing to do with the chain didn't work or the tech didn't work. The beginning of the downfall was a disaster that happened from the arbitration side.
Investor,
where essentially,
EOS.
where
You're
essentially
investor in EOS.
it opens another almost a single point of failure through essentially kind of a DDoS style set of claims that are coming in, where your backlog is so great that now all of a sudden miners are frozen in time, trying to freeze coins, unfreeze, track what's approved, and it became a total nightmare. It undermined the entire project, and he can tell you,
Okay.
firsthand. He like I said, he was there. So
Who's he?
Ian Grigg.
Oh, Ian. Okay. So I got Ian Grigg and I got you. And also I'm going to go to you, Cub. I want to hear what you have to say. But first, Crypto Voyager, you mentioned something, and I think that you're on the against side now that what I've heard. So go ahead, Crypto Voyager.
What? I'm not. I'm not on the against side. I'm on the abstain side. Let's put it this way. The against side would mean a fork. If push comes to shove, it would mean a fork. I've had enough forks in my life. And by the way, Bitcoin doesn't fork.
Well, I don't think that's
Well. Tell me about what you said about the white
patents, but
paper, Crypto
anyways.
Voyager. You said something about the white paper and the DAR.
Well, the first paragraph of the white paper is a rant over the current system with the centralized entities emitting money, with the centralized entities being the source of trust, the finality. Let's put it this way, and the whole white paper shows a finality. The whole concept of Bitcoin is that there is a finality, a consensus from within the whole system itself, where it is asymptotically approaching finality. It's not completely final, but there's a 99.9999999 that it is final. Okay, and where we all have agreed that that's after like 6 blocks, because after 6 blocks it's too difficult to whatever. Anyway, all of that mathematical thing where an entity that has no consciousness of what law is can still understand what the state of the chain is, and therefore be moved, actuated upon. Yeah, and then suddenly from outside, Deus ex machina wise, suddenly appears this new concept called the DAR. So I understand. I accept the NAR as a necessary crutch. Yeah, when I say crutch, I really mean like trying to walk with just one leg, and you need crutches. Yeah, that's the NAR for me at the moment. Yeah, where further down the road, once this whole fog of stupidity hopefully goes away by mere facts, comes in, that we will not need a NAR. Yeah, we will not need a NAR because the whole world would be going, you are crazy if you believe that you can change the rules. Yeah, but that is after what some might call hyper-Bitcoinization, or after we have hardware that connects with the blockchain, like IoT devices and all of that, like the NICs, the network cards that we have now in place. We have billions of them all over the world. Once the blockchain gets addressed by that kind of hardware, then we will not need an R anymore. Okay. Brad is agreeing with me. Brad is agreeing with me. Okay, fine.
Wow,
fine.
all right. And I
Okay.
saw
So it's almost
Cubs.
like
Yeah, because Brad understands where I'm coming from. Yeah, that's why I'm saying that the NAR is right now like crutches, like guiding rails, like those like training wheels on a bicycle.
Yep.
Yeah, they're uncomfortable.
Oh.
They're not needed, but they might be necessary for people that don't know how to stay in their lane, who don't know how to ride a bike, who don't know how to walk. That's where we are right now. We are just 15 years into this technology, which humanity will have for the next, who knows, a few centuries. Okay, in some form or other. Okay, so it is a necessity at the moment, sadly.
There's a
But that's
there's
because a
but
lot of
that's coming
people
up.
have chosen the adventure of BTC. If we would not have chosen the adventure of BTC and we would be in BSV and Bitcoin would be what we now know as BSV, we wouldn't talk about NAR. That would be a duh. Of course it is. Okay, but the DAR, the digital asset recovery, that thing comes kind of like the hand of God from outside of the system,
Yep.
and that is too much power.
Yeah. So Gavin,
That
let's
that's
we
that's
actually
what
almost
you that's what
it's almost two
6,000 years
separate.
of humanity's history has shown us. It would be too much power.
So Gavin, I actually think there's really two separate conversations actually.
Wow.
Now that there's
Yeah.
two, it's the DAR can be a separate conversation, right? And I think the NAR, I definitely agree with his assessment that it's almost like training wheels. And the way I read it is it's a formal opt-in, right, legally to the miners to kind of keep them in check from, acting honestly, legally, et cetera, which I fully support. My only critique, and then I'll let other folks chime in, is I do believe that it is incredibly burdensome and onerous to the point where I immediately disconnected my node that I'm paying $200 a month for, because there's indemnification language that any node, regardless if you're a miner or listener, whatever low level node that you're responsible for indemnifying BSV association, which some folks would say that's just standard language within any license agreement. Not necessarily. The way I read it, and again, within my line of work, we do a lot of business with companies who will utilize contracts, and we redline a lot of agreements, etc. And anytime indemnification comes up, I can tell you it's a massive red flag where my lawyers start saying what's going on, and it's a massive red flag. So that's essentially adding burden, a layer of legal burden to the miners, which is just going to make it a lot more difficult to kind of build on top of. So I would just like some clarification as far as, hey, that's the vision that we have. We want the developers to utilize, let's say, the Terra node, right, and kind of write via like the cloud-based kind of technology. I can definitely understand that, but it'd be nice to just have some clarification, because there's a lot of folks who want to be able to connect in, and if it's advised not to, right, that hey, this is because like I said, after I read that, you're going to need lawyers and counsel on retainer to be able to approve you connecting to that. That's how kind of onerous it is.
So it sounds
And
like
so
we got
again,
two
yeah.
separate things here. The NAR. So it seems like there's no objection in any of this call so far about that. It's the DAR that is the objection.
The DAR, yeah, the DAR, and that's where I think you're seeing it lumped together. We really need to separate those two issues, because a lot of the gripe is, I would say 99% would be the DAR. You know what I mean?
Got it.
And so the NAR is just really just redlining, hey, this language, whatever. Because again, it's a unilateral contract, meaning you don't get to redline. You just have to either opt in or not. And so the way it's set up right now, it's going to, unless you're kind of a startup with a lot of capital to deploy and to have, legal expenses, it's going to be really difficult for just someone to connect in. And so not that it should or should not be that way, because I do believe that the commercialization of the mining needs to happen. I just, again, would like some clarification on that piece. So,
Okay.
Yep.
Before I go back to Brett, can I, Cub is saying 100%, and I'm just wondering what he's got to say about this. Seems like he's in agreement with someone. So are you able to unmute? There we go. How you doing, my man?
Yeah, good. Glad to join you all here this evening, and interesting conversations already. So glad to chime in.
Can you come a little closer to the mic?
Sure. Is that better?
No.
Yeah. Oh, not really. I've been having some
Testing.
speaker problems. Is that all right now, or?
It's fading in and out. Sorry.
Oh wow, yeah. It's weird because I can't press the button on the.
Now you're good.
It's a little better.
Oh,
it's a little better.
Okay. Well, I wanted, if it comes through, I wanted to comment on the EOS. I'm for the NAR, but cautious about the DAR, like some others. and I see it as a distinction between governance and dispute resolution. But I wanted to first highlight the work of Ian Grigg with EOS, because I raised it with him as well, and I didn't push it with him. Why would he make his own if he thought the other one was the original and the real one? But maybe it's an attempt to test, because I didn't realize that they had tried to scale and there was a backlog. Dispute resolution totally makes sense. You run that problem if you try to become a law, right, a legal entity within the decentralized ledger community. So, but maybe it was like as a guinea pig of some kind. But I agree with the comments that, if you have this ability to freeze or to arbitrate, that's something very different than simply saying, look, we want to keep to the white paper, we want to keep to what Satoshi wrote in the emails and forums, and that's what we're building on. The second and different thing is, okay, well, and that's the public, actually, that's the triple entry accounting, where Grigg, I think, should have come, but he left that out. In the writings he's given, I don't see that in his works. So it's not a surprise to me, but it's new to me. So thank you for pointing out where it failed with EOS.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cub.
Yeah,
Well,
no, appreciate that. Yeah.
How about Brett? Let's see if we can go back to Brett. Now just a quick summary. We now clarified that we got two issues here to discuss. It's not just the NAR. It's definitely not, and it's mainly we got two to discuss. So I got Brett, back to you. What are your thoughts on this DAR? It seems like there's some major objections from people here, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so thanks very much again for the opportunity to share my 2 cents on this. I wanted to comment back to Crypto Voyager's comment, because within our household, I'm a father, I have a 12-year-old and 11-year-old. We have some house rules in our family. But one of the house rules in our family is like, don't murder people, right? We don't have that house rule, despite the fact that it's like an implicit rule, right? But it's like, we have that rule in other places, like the, the town square, where like potentially we can have some lowest common denominator. Sometimes with the rule set that you use, like, and my point is that it doesn't always just have to do with what the rules are, because like like when I get a job at the laundromat, I walk in and look, okay, what are my jobs what are the rules of me being an employee here? And one of the rules that I see on the wall, there's no one that takes the time to write, don't drink the bleach, despite the fact that that is like theoretically a rule like working there, so my point is that that the rules are oftentimes just a necessary evil that has to do with the lowest common denominators that you're going to be interfacing with. So when Crypto Voyager is talking about this future, potentially where these rules aren't necessary, it's not necessarily to say that you can violate those rules in the same way that I can't violate the rule, don't drink the bleach. It's just that it's more of an implicit rule. We don't have to do it, we don't have to spell it out, right? Because it's like no one would do that anyway. And that's what I sort of got out of Crypto Voyager's comments of like, this is where this hyper Bitcoinization world that we're seeing ahead of us, that it would become like completely insane, just as insane to have a rule in your laundromat saying don't drink bleach, to say like, hey, don't manipulate and try to push false blocks on the network, etc. Because the original concept that Satoshi had, that economic interest is going to be what drives us forward. And the important part about economic interest driving us forward is that it's not any single economic interest or any single point from which that economic interest comes from, or is seeking to benefit, but it's the combined economic interest of all people acting in their own best interest and in their own economic interest that creates the fertile soil through which that information can be shared. You know, and we're seeing a day and age where, you know, the economic interest, the sharing of information, and the implications that that has on economic interest with, you know, you look at the Twitter files and, you know, things like that, where information is being censored and all this stuff because of this economic interest behind it. You know, we're seeing that Bitcoin is like a breaking of that fourth wall, like Crypto Voyager was saying, where it says you as a participant on the network have the have the option of moving to page 35 and believing the false reality, believing the lie, you know, that keeps us safe. This is sort of portrayed in the movie The Matrix when Cyrus is sitting in the dining room and he says, I know that this steak doesn't exist, but you know what? Ignorance is bliss. And, you know, you can do that. You have the option of doing that, or you can move to page 38 and you can, you know, oftentimes what we find is that, you know, our self-sovereignty, we think of it as like, oh, it's like this utopia that we're just going to get into and everything's going to be taken care of for us. Like we're in mom's womb again, right? Like, yeah, like we'll have, you know, our self-sovereignty is just this utopian vision, but it's actually the opposite, right? It's like this burdensome like obligation, and it's like completely filled with sacrifice and all of this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, you know, it's worth it because it's a sacrifice that you have the option to participate with, and you can freely participate with that burden and with that sacrifice, or you can sort of like blindly accept the reality that's predetermined for you. So that's how I see kind of the scope of some of these topics in these conversations. And then with respect to, you know, digital asset recovery, you know, that is, you know, a whole nother can of worms. And you know, this is, I think that it's, you know, again, I'm not an expert on EOS's governance model or their node structure or anything like that. And there could be, and part of my process on this journey with you, Gavin, with you, Michael, with you, Crypto Voyager, is just learning, you know, so I'm here to listen, to learn, and to flag times when something smells a little fishy to me. And so so I can't necessarily say or speak to, and would love to hear Ian, maybe even if it's not hear him talk about it on the spaces like this, which would be great if we could do that. But even if I could just read some of his writings on this, like originally I thought this, but I ended up thinking this. I mean, that's how we learn from our history. First of all, we have to have access and open, honest
Yeah, his
history
papers are
to learn
available.
from. Yeah, exactly. And then we need
US
to
is there.
analyze it. Yeah.
Because that's the curiosity for me, Brett, is why would Ian? Because it sounds like he met Craig in 2015. Why would he have pivoted? I don't know that story. I don't know if anyone else does. But Ian's a brilliant guy. 1996 was the Ricardian contract, and in 2005 was the triple entry accounting. And one of my big questions is why wasn't anything on triple entry accounting? Because you could have gone back to Ujiri in the 1980s, but why was nothing added to the Bitcoin white paper? That's one of my like puzzlements, because the network creation on top of the technological possibility that it enabled this peer-to-peer cash. Okay, well, so what's the network? Because as soon as you start putting, I'm a sociologist, as soon as you start distributing it or decentralizing it, there's arguments. You can't avoid that. So what Grigg did is huge with his Ricardian contracts, and then bringing in the digital into this triple entry. But what I think is missing, and maybe that's
1 second. We gotta reconnect.
Bitcoin is not doing it. But I really am awaiting more clarity on that. And I'm thankful to hear about this, that this was attempted by EOS. I followed it. I actually had some a little bit, but I got turned off when I read some stuff. And
Nice. Now let me just
but
jump.
it's a big part of the conversation, because you have a major player who went away from Bitcoin into EOS, experimented with it in terms of governance, and governance is probably one of the biggest things that seems to me. But here, you all who are leading this are part of sort of changing that. But that's one of the biggest things sort of missing. You have leaders, but they might not be governors. right? They might not be secretaries, right? Do you need a secretary general of every blockchain? That's a kind of question, you know. So anyway, I throw back to you all. And
Yeah, Michael, I sent you a request to jump back up as a co-host if you're getting it. It looks like you fell down. So, and anybody else who wants to jump up and comment on this, we're looking for people who can be on this panel. And I got Michael Scott on the against side, Ian Grigg, Crypto Voyager, Cub, not just in principle, but like as a potential, you know, this is like a debate that could be had. And then we got Connor Murray and Brett on the for side. Back to you, Brett. You were really making a great point, and I wanted to see if you remember what you were saying.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for the opportunity, and thank you also, Cub, for kind of adding some layers of context there. Maybe I'll just sort of conclude by just talking about that from a macro perspective, the concept of adding context and adding layers. Something that you know, I've been really trying to explore myself in terms of you know, again, sorry to keep going into the philosophical side. You can tell probably it's my main passion and interest, and I like exploring topics from their philosophical components. But you know, one of the things that I learned when I was a young man, first of all, when I was a really young man, I thought I knew everything. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room, you know, and like, you know, I didn't need anyone to tell me anything. I could formulate truth all on my own, etc. You know, one of the great revelations for me in terms of my journey to what I think is like more of an actual ground understanding of my approach to truth, discernment, etc., is the idea that, wow, at a certain point, I kind of became sort of a little bit full of myself or something like that. Like I thought I really had all of the answers. And guess what? If you have all the answers, you don't really need the inclusions or input of other people, right? I can look at this person and I can judge a book by the cover. I can say exactly what would be good for that person. And I don't actually have to create a meaningful interaction with them and figure out, well, actually, maybe I just jumped to a conclusion. Maybe that thing that I was thinking. So what I guess my point is that I realized that although I am pretty good at like smelling bullshit and stuff like that, it also became, what if me as the smeller is part of the thing that I need to start to you know, question. You know, what if I need to question myself? Am I smelling it correctly? You know what I mean? So you know, this is you know, something that I think relates to this concept of digital asset recovery, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, the value add that we get by building this distributed ledger across a public network and disseminating the information widely is that when an actor comes along and tries to dispute common knowledge and common information that the network has access to, then we can all say like, look at that. That is a clear attempt to undermine or subvert information that has already been established. You know, one of the things that we, you know, not to get off topic here, but just because it's on the blockchain doesn't mean it's true. We need to also understand that the blockchain is a registry of information, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with whether that information itself is valuable or not. So those are some of the key components here. We have to understand that we're talking about a distributed ledger of information that can be updated by anyone. But just because it can be updated by anyone, the main concern is that it be updated frivolously for no reason and in an effort to undermine you know, certain narratives and things like this, right? And part of the reason why we don't have a central you know, entity that is responsible for updating it all is because of the, you know, the inherent concerns that it becomes an attack vector when there's a single entity that's able to update all that information, et cetera. So it's required to be updated across this distributed node network, and the nodes need to be able to signal to each other, despite the fact that there could be, like we talked about before, lowest common denominator agents on the network who are seeking to undermine the network itself and seeking to undermine the information.
Well, how many
But
need
just
to agree on
because
the DAR though, to validate it? How many need to agree on the DAR to make it valid? Because it can be made by two people, but it would need to
Just 1 second, what Cub, you know, please, I'm going to go to
Hey,
you
I'm
next. I got
I'm back, by the way.
BSV. Okay, you're back, Michael.
And then yeah, let's let
Yeah,
BSV Panama
BSV
come
Panama's
up.
up next. So
Yeah,
go
let's,
ahead. Unless Brett, you know, you want to finish your point and then go to BSV.
so it interrupt. Yeah.
Yeah, let's
sure.
let BSV Panama next. Or yeah. Okay, bro.
All right, sorry, yeah. So just the conclusion of that is to say, okay, just because it gets updated in this distributed manner across a node network doesn't mean that that necessarily has to be the only way that it gets updated. It can be updated through other mechanisms. It's just that there needs to be a sufficient degree of that same degree of distribution where there's the same rigor of checks and balances to ensure that the information isn't being updated for nefarious purposes and all these things. So that is where I think the DAR sits, and it's part of what makes it sit unwell with certain people, where they're just saying, well, hey, just because this well, first of all, that you get into the concept of digital asset ownership and the concept that, hey, not your keys, not your coins. So like we have a process in place for the returning of physical property to its rightful owner, but because what do we can just sort of like chalk it up and say, hey, you know what, this is a distributed network, you lost access to those coins, or those coins were stolen from you. You know what, that's just what happens. Sucks to be you when we live in a world that gets updated in a distributed manner. There's no mechanism to revert that. And so what the digital asset recovery effort is, and this is something that I think is built off of the back of the alert system that Satoshi was originally outlining. This is why Connor would be a great person to bring on this panel, and I will sort of end there so I can listen to what BSV Panama has to say. But just to say that the component of returning rightful digital property to its owner is the primary function of the digital asset recovery.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so Gavin, let's let BSV Panama up, and then after him, I'm going to just add some context to respond to Brett.
Sounds good.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Sorry I was late. I just want to quickly comment and give my opinion. I want to let it known that I support Brett's vision fully and completely. One for the NAR and for the DAR. For me, this is very simple. It's not something complicated. If I reduce it, I might want to make an example, reduce a little bit the situation just to make it more understandable. We have systems that are governed by people, and the system by itself cannot govern itself. So when people disrupt a system or want to make a problem,
just a quick mic check, Gavin.
They can.
Gotcha.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, and I can hear you too, Michael.
Okay, I didn't know if BSV was able to come up, but
no, Michael, he's talking right now, Michael.
The thing is, when people are behind any system, any technological solution is made by people, and there is people behind it and working with it. It's like the let's say the traffic system. The traffic system with the rules. You have certain rules. They might not everybody might agree with the rules, but in the end, it's for the benefit of all. So that's the most important thing. That in the end, these can be put in place for the benefit of all, even if a few participants might not agree or might have objections. Well, then we talk about the objections. But the principle, the idea behind it, is for the benefit of all, because a system is not a human entity. It's just a tool. So the tool has to have regulations in order for people to use it well. This is my position. Thank you.
That's wonderful. I'd like to come back to you as well on this. It's a really valued point, and thank you for your insight. Back to Michael before we go to you, Cub, if we can. Michael?
Yeah, I apologize. For some reason, I couldn't hear anything. Maybe it was just not sure why in terms of BSV Panama. So sorry about that.
Oh, all good. Yeah, he
summary?
was basically, summary is he's supporting the NAR and the DAR. He's saying that it's very important to have a government system in place because there is no, the Bitcoin network, it can't govern itself. Therefore, if there is some sort of regulation, a body in place that can, make something happen like this digital asset recovery, then it is ultimately a good thing and it's necessary. So that's his position, and I want to, you're up.
Perfect. So I agree with definitely the premise, and to kind of echo Brett's point, just because I was able to hear him. Philosophically speaking and theoretically speaking, it makes a ton of sense, right? You know, let's say in the future when you have, you know, titles to your home, to your car, like these are things that you have to be able to kind of recover in the real world, you know, kind of scenarios, right? We don't just, I definitely am opposed to code as law and, you know, that whole premise and everything Craig's ever said as far as, you know, keys, ownership, etc. Also his challenges to kind of the legal system in terms of, you know, court orders, etc. I've always cheered and supported that, you know, and been kind of vocal in such as well. So for it's more of the in practice part, right? And that's where I think Ian Grigg is going to be really important to talk to, and he really should be advised, just because again he was part of implementing that, you know, very similar system, and he saw, you know, let's say he still believes it can work, then he could give us perspective on, you know, some downsides that they ran into and maybe some lessons learned. And so definitely, you know, in talking to him, I think is going to be critical. But just again to underscore, in practice is really where the shortcomings came, and it was ended up undermining the whole system, right? So something that we think is a good feature or benefit may actually be disadvantageous, right, to the system. So that was really just kind of the 2 cents I wanted to add. I think people should research what happened, because again, what ended up happening was every claim and every hack that occurred, now all of a sudden, you know, folks are submitting a claim to get rescinded and to get refunded and what have you. So as a byproduct of that, it's going to lower the level of security, right, within wallets, within infrastructure, within exchanges, because you always just know that, hey, I could just put in a claim and get my, you know, get my asset back. So there's definitely a balance, I think, that needs to be struck, and whether that proposal is almost like a last resort, which hopefully it would be, and not just kind of like you know, every day, hey, I lost my keys, I you know, I'm entitled to it. That's really where I think the conversation needs to be shined upon, or, you know, a spotlight needs to be shined for further, you know, kind of scenarios, and just maybe there's an adversarial aspect to it as well. Because again, let's say, what if in a jurisdiction, right, that they're using, which I believe is Scotland, or not Scotland, Wales and England, what if like Judge Mehl says, hey, you're not Satoshi, we're gonna confiscate all your coins, and this is now, you know, binding arbitration within Swiss, you know, court or what have you. So I just think that you're adding a ton of different layers, and there's a lot, you know, this is brand new, right? So this isn't something that was ever part of Bitcoin previously. And so I just would like to know, you know, Craig's thoughts, obviously, and just overall kind of what, you know, where are they, you know, where is this ever going to be taking place, right? Is it just for, like, again, like a last resort type situation?
Yeah.
I just want to see how it plays out. So.
All right. So Ian Grigg, that is a potential person that you really want to get involved on this panel. So that's noted. Cub, you're up next, buddy. Thanks for patiently waiting. Then we'll go to Crypto Voyager again.
Hey, thanks. That's great. Yeah, I definitely support Ian Grigg being brought into these conversations. I heard that he was left out. They didn't invite him to participate in the recent trial, but he's a key figure, and his experience with the U.S. So thank you, Michael, for bringing that up. And it makes sense. I can sort of logically, if they tried to do that, it would become unmanageable. So when you talked about the backlog, yeah, that totally made sense. If you turn it into a claim machine, right, what was supposed to be peer-to-peer electronic cash, if you turn that into something different, it may be, it seems to me that maybe, because I know other people, this has happened to them, it may be that Ian Grigg, and I've had some conversations with him, not voice yet, but chat-wise, but he may have got baffled by blockchain versus cash, because a lot of the projects have. And if you're going into trying to be a governance, yeah, if you're trying to make a solution to products and services where you're implementing a micro, meso, and macro, and it's not tokenomics. You're talking digital economics here, because you can go add an extra zero, you can go below the sort of basement of what was possible, where we're 0.1 cents was the base. We're going into micro now, which is below that. But you have to take into account those additional layers of governance. And Grigg, Ian has written on this as well. I'm not convinced he's got the governance aspect solved. But that's exactly what the NAR and the DAR are about. If I may, just to add on, because I agree, like, you need to have something, and this movement from sort of the cypherpunks, as in some cases sort of being almost anarchists, to more recently as in law has to come in here, code isn't law, keys doesn't prove ownership, things like this. But to me, the sort of pitch of Shoesmith here was, we're the group that stands by the law. We're the ones that want the courts to be able to have a voice. We're the ones that believe in that legal system. That's what the NAR and the DAR were, and the way I see it, were meant to support. But the DAR, the issue is then who controls, and that comes back to the association and end chain and TAL, if you want to say, or the miners. Because the issue then is the transparency of those who are currently leaders. What qualifies them? How much are they getting paid? What are they doing for what they're getting? And then also, how are they facilitators and bringing in others to take roles? Because there's thousands of roles. So the issue is you have way too few people in a situation where there's way more roles. And of course, the people who, it's pride, everyone has pride, in one way or another. They're proud of they're in that role. And, they don't want it to be their role to be subdivided into 3 roles or 10 roles, right? But if it's going to become ubiquitous in terms of what at least most of us here, I believe, think Satoshi wanted, right? Which is this low cost, ubiquitous peer-to-peer cash system. That makes something different. But all this layering of the network, right? That's governance, that's ecosystem, that's community, and that's what BSV, at least from my experience, and not being as long as others here, that's the weakest point. And there needs to be bringing together. And so, Gavin,
the weakest point,
Mehl and others.
just in summary, the weakest point is what?
Well, the lack of an ecosystem, the lack of a direction, the sort of everybody's going in their own way, and there's no coordination, there's no schedule. Gavin, we talked about that last time, because then you can plan ahead for the next week. There's 4 BSV related ecosystem events this week, and I can plan them because they're scheduled in advance. And why? Because they benefit each other if they do that. Like, it's just, we give courtesy to each other, and the courtesy is that trust. And the trust is that we've been in this and we believe in the technology, but we have to see the applications. So there's definitely politics involved here, and those who have positions are certainly privileged, right? And those who don't have it would maybe like to have those positions. In Canada, we're not represented. BSV Association is not represented. There's no member of that in Canada. So it's like, do I feel left out? Well, maybe it's an issue of there needs to be some advances in the way the ecosystem is organized, in the way committees are formed, in the way choices are made. And you have a few leaders who have been in it, in terms of the BSV Association being led by people, but maybe that needs to become more decentralized, at least in a way that can get people excited about it, where their voice counts. Because I think the jurisdictional issue is the real issue with the NAR. So someone in Brazil, someone in China, someone in Russia, someone in Sweden, Canada, they can have a local a legal take that differs from the global one, right, of the association. And that has to be respected, because unless you want to flip countries in terms of their sovereignty, right? But otherwise, we're creating a supranational organization, and there's no precedent for it. And we need to have people not only distribute power to others, like encourage others to take positions and lead and build and grow and coordinate and enable others locally, but also then to be able to meet with other people who want to build dApps that are not just designed for their local market, but that would fit a global market. And for that, you need some kind of hackathon events. But beyond that, like some of the other ecosystems already have, BSV doesn't have that. It's not there. It's underdeveloped in those regions. So maybe the DAR could help. And I think it's good legally. DAR, there's a lot of questions that remain to me about who has power over that. But otherwise, the principle of it is definitely agreeable that assets should be able to be recovered. And if not, none of this makes any sense, right?
Beautiful.
So it's yeah.
Cub, really valuable insight, man. Thank you on what you're sharing here on some of the weaknesses and the points that you're pointing out in opposition and support. Crypto Voyagers, your hand up. I'd love to hear from you on what your comments are.
Yeah, my hand is up. Look, I'm agreeing basically with all of you guys. The thing.
Refresh. Michael disconnected, so we're.
Introduction of the white paper, and I quote, completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes.
Conditionally? Is that what it is instead? Crypto? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Is that okay? Is it conditionally rather than completely?
Yes, they are conditional. Now, with the introduction of the DAR, all transactions are conditional. All of it. So me as a buyer, I cannot know if what I'm buying will be removed from me afterwards. And then not only that, I will have to prove that I bought it in good faith. So the question is, to who do I do that? I go then to an arbiter, a court, and then after it has been removed, it has to be removed again. So for me, this whole DAR thing, and then the question, of course, is who is the most highest arbiter? Is it then the Swiss government because they can barge into the door, or is it the US that can suddenly confiscate assets of a sovereign nation that they currently don't like? Again, it's too much power. It goes completely against the white paper.
And the sanctions.
That's
stuff,
my
for
point.
example.
So,
Exactly.
Cub, let me just comment really before you do that. So it sounds like what you're saying, Crypto Voyager, is the condition. It's creating a condition. And I guess an example of that would be like a chargeback on a credit card where I buy it on a credit
Exactly.
card. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
It creates a chargeback on a credit card. And if you read the introduction to the Bitcoin white paper in the first chapter, it basically rants about what the chargeback, all of it entails, all the cost, all the bureaucracy on top, behind the curtain. And with Bitcoin, you don't have that. And of course, the salvatory sentence that is being used to talk about the DAR is then the end sentence of the white paper saying, yeah, the miners enforce the rules. And of course, the white paper has to be a subset of the rules of the state. Let's put it this way. Yeah, but don't change the system inside. Don't come from it from outside. Do if I steal something, then the police comes in and tells me, hey, yeah, you're going to jail. Oh, and by the way, you have to give that back. Instead of this clawback, which basically means that nothing on the chain is then secure from that clawback, and it creates then ripple effects.
So it sounds like it creates a condition on the transaction. So you're saying that it could potentially, not be cash. That seems to be your potentially, what you're saying. We haven't heard from Brett in a while. Did you Cub, did you want to say something before we go?
Well, I mean, I could maybe ask a question in there because I've had it in some of these Bitcoin meetup groups locally, BTC Maxi. Are you saying, Crypto Voyager, then that you think Bitcoin should be outside the law? Like that there should be no legal claim on it? Because to me, that's
No,
all.
Cup. Wait, okay, Cup. I go to you with a $5 wrench and I hit you over the head. Yeah, and instead of me stealing your Bitcoin, I steal your wallet, and I go to the gas station and fill up my gas tank. What would happen to me today in real life, as my son likes to say? Hopefully there are some witnesses. You're going to call the police and you're going to tell, hey, your Crypto Voyager did a $5 wrench attack, stole my wallet, used the money and did the gasoline. And what I would get would be jail. That is how we, or at least in the West, in some countries, I would get my hand chopped off. Yeah, so there is already a control mechanism in place. It's not your wallet that kind of like spikes me in the hand and tells me, hey, don't steal me. So outside of it is the thing. So if something happens in the blockchain, then outside of the blockchain, in what some people would call meat space, I'm still liable for what I did as a criminal. Hypothetical.
Cub?
Yeah, so in short, now I want to turn it back over to Brett because I know, Gavin, you're on that. But in short, it's about the legality issue, right? And don't make things illegal on the chain, right? And don't create a parallel legal system, right? Allow the current existing law enforcement agencies to do their thing, right? Don't try to become a law enforcing agency. I think that's, some people get unclear about that. They think, oh, the DAR means you're going to have a whole bunch of agents now going out and tracking down those wallets, and so they can get the on that sense. I can see, like, you're not, those who don't who are saying let's not create a parallel legal and that, because it would then be connected to BSV association organization that whose responsibility would be to go all around the world to any jurisdiction. They'd be a cross-jurisdictional entity, right? Whose responsibility would be to enforce these things, right? The other alternative is to say, look, the NAR and the DAR, and I would say for me, the way I'm seeing it now, and I haven't read through the DAR, but I have read through the NAR. The DAR is a subset of the NAR, the way that I see it. And what you're really trying to get is that you're respecting of national jurisdictions or local or regional jurisdictions. That's it. Period. Over. End of story. Bitcoin agrees with that. However, what Bitcoin has done, because it's a new technology, because it's a new thing that people don't understand, and they're going to get scammed, and a lot of people know about it. I saw someone recently. Oh man, it was terrible. The police picked up the phone while she was stuffing money into the Bitcoin ATM. She's losing her money. She keeps doing it. Police says don't do it. She keeps doing it. But there's all this education that is missing. So in this period, the association is saying, look, let's take the initiative. Let's get ahead of this. Let's help educate people. Let's get prepared for what's going to happen. But really what that is like, all we're saying is you got to be able to get your money back if someone steals it from you. That's it. It's not that much more complicated. The issue is, how do you do that? And because the problem is Bitcoin is global. It's a cross-national thing, right? As money. So, and every national jurisdiction has to deal with it. So the question to me is about the association in the future. Who's going to represent it? How transparent, how open, and how constructive it's going to be for the overall ecosystem. Because it may be that BSV Association is not responsible for any new apps. They're not at all. And that would be the worst case. right?
I love it, Cub. Let
And
me
then-
just interrupt
ahead.
here if I could. I want to say I sent out a message there to Greg Ward. I'd love to have him come up here if he'd like to speak. And I just want to kind of just to summarize here that we've got some really good points, and I want to hear from Mehl and Casey on ultimately whether you understand this whole thing or not, because I sure don't. The whole thing about this is like we want to be educated. I learned so much already, about this DAR from just the last hour. So, and now we've got 4 people that could potentially speak on it: Cub, Crypto Voyager, Ian, Grigg, Michael Scott against the DAR, and 4, Connor, potentially Kurt, potentially Brett, potentially BSV Panama, maybe Greg Ward. I don't know what his position is. So who else can we, should we put on this panel? Casey, Mehl, any comments?
I would just say thank you, everybody, for sharing your view on it. Because me too. I mean, I'm getting the impression that that most everybody, a lot of people
History is another
wonder,
person
and
that I know is, at the government level.
there's so many
having a lot
pros
of
and
Oh.
cons.
Hold on, I'm getting 2 people at once. Go, Casey, can you wait just once? If you may not, yeah, wait 1 second. Go ahead, Mehl.
Yeah, so it just seems like there's so many, reasons to be wondering about it, and also when you read something, right, then you can understand it in some way and you can read into it, and I just get the feeling that, well, it feels kind of out of my hands, this. So
Well,
so for
it may
me it's
not
more
be
interesting.
really more in your hands than you think about, because if you're here right now, right, and you're saying, you know what, I really want to hear so and so what his opinion is and what he thinks about it, that's really, you're kind of like, we could potentially put that together and be more educated on it at this point, and that's
That's how I see it, to be more educated on it, and that helps then to hear people's different ways of looking at it.
Yeah.
But what I mean with that it's out of my hands is that, this is, I can't change anything there, right? It is what it is, and it's there. And I must admit that the more I'm experiencing dishonesty and horrific things online, for example, then I also feel like it's needed. These kind of things are just needed. There are people out there who cause, things so that we need these kind of things. So, yeah.
Okay. Nice. Okay. Thank you, Mehl. This is really, so you're for it, and we got BSV Panama to potentially be on the 4 side as well to speak about it. I did invite Greg. I'd love to hear what he has to say if he comes up in a request. Casey, back to you. Now, I know you're in a bad reception, you said, on your phone in a valley, but can you hear me? Casey? Okay, no, maybe you can't.
Yeah, I only have 1 bar right now, so I don't know if you guys can hear
Yeah.
me, but
We got you.
I was just saying, Bryan Daugherty is another person
Oh,
that I would love to hear
Bryan.
from, because he's like literally going to Congress and the governments and talking to them about all this stuff. So I think
Good
he'd have
point.
some really
Bryan.
good insights to add.
Bryan Daugherty. That's great. That's with Smart Ledger. Bryan Daugherty. All right, nice. Well, Brett, back to you, man. What do you, I mean, who else would you like to hear? Who, if you could pick somebody on the panel besides Connor Murray, who else? Because we still have more spots available. Kurt, who else? I mean, for the 4 side, would you want to hear from?
Yeah, I would say, I know it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but let's invite George Orwell up on the topic, and let's also invite, while we're at it, Thomas Jefferson up, and William
What about Napoleon
Golding,
Hill?
who wrote Lord of the Flies, because what we're doing is we're really looking at these basic systems that are so vital to humanity in terms of our liberty and our freedom, which is just, how do we preserve our integrity? How do we preserve justice without subverting it and coverting it by making it, coming only from this one particular vantage point? These are the problems that we're struggling with, and to the degree to which we are able to do that successfully is the degree to which we're contributing to the age-old conversations around these same topics, around how to, like the book Lord of the Flies comes to mind. These people get dropped on a desert island and they have to form a system of governance. Now, they don't create the perfect system of governance, but they create a system of governance. And the thing that I guess I would conclude with here is just to say that, okay, I want to go back to, we were talking about the system of American governance with, the legislative branch and, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and again, these aren't perfect. What?
Well, no, it's to paint the picture on that. You look at it like a baseball diamond in America. You got first base, second base, and third base, and then home plate is the grand jury. So you got three branches of government and the people at home. With
Exactly. And us people at home, we can't put people, like a man on first, a man on second, and a man on third, and then say, hey, our work's done here. We get to go home and we'll have liberty till the end of time, because guess what? We put a man on first and a man on second and a man on third. And how could they would never do the grand jury wrong, right? They would never. We're the home plate, right? Yeah. No, that's not how it works. We always, and this is a constant reminder that we have that, we should be skeptical. We should be vigilant for anything that has to do with, systems of governance, especially when it comes to preserving liberty, because oftentimes systems that come in and are attempting to, argue that it's a preservation of liberty or something, that's the easiest way to disguise something that's fascist, right? Or that's technocratic. So it's like, of course, raise your eyebrows. And then the other thing is like, how did that Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, how did they form? It's not like they came out because one genius just sat down and said, guess what? I understand everything that everyone needs. You guys don't need to do any work. Just go home. I'm going to sit here on first base or on second base or on third base. I'll write it all out and it'll be here. It'll be great from now until the end of time. No, the process is an ongoing process of conversation. And when we hold these spaces and when we talk about these topics and these subjects, it's also a reminder of ourselves of the importance of these topics, not just the NAR and the DAR, but what's deeper, what's below these topics. And then it's a reminder to us too that this is an ongoing gradual conversation, that we don't just solve all of the world's problems with a single brilliant idea or something like that, but we need to continually be hashing these questions out and saying, well, this is what I liked about the EOS application, this is what I didn't like about it, and potentially these are the pitfalls, right? This is how if we have an integrity and a truth machine that preserves our history, then we need to use it. And it's the degree to which we can use it that's theoretically, hopefully that gives us the advantage over the system that we're trying to, escape from, which is a system of just sort of do as I say, not as I do, and just sit back, don't do anything. It'll all get taken care for you by, by this power or that power. And don't worry, don't look over here. You don't need to know what's going on. You just go home, get your gallon of bread and your jug of milk, and
got my remote control and my TV, Brett. What else do I need?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a call to us. We saw what happened with, the subversion of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's supposed to be this independent, this free-spirited technology, right? That's supposed to drive truth and drive, and it's supposed to be distributed and all of these things. And we saw how human nature, how susceptible we are as human beings to just the allure of fast dollars, and the ability to say, what, these were the rules when I started, but I've suddenly changed my mind. I don't know what it is that's making me change my mind, but there's my Lambo over there in the parking
Nice.
lot, and so, we always be vigilant, always be on the lookout. That's my, so these conversations are great. I really welcome them. And I know that in my heart of hearts, and again, I could be wrong or whatever, never take anything as final, like Crypto was saying, but in my heart of hearts, I truly believe that Connor Murray is a steward, and he would sort of back me up on everything that I just said. And it is about the preservation of the implicit rules of the white paper. It's just making those, especially the NAR, is just making those implicit rules explicit rules at this point. And it is an open conversation. I know Connor's mentioned that too. Like, hey, if there's a component that you really don't like, you know, don't just sit there and say like, oh, that's just, you know, the association, they're just a bunch of bastards, and you know, like it's just you know, technocracy trying to squeeze its way back in through the open like vantage point that liberty represents. And it's like no, go, you know, he has an email. It's connor.murray@bsvblockchain.org. Send him an email. Just say, hey, this is the specific section that I have a problem with, or this is the specific question that I'd like an answer to. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean host these spaces, because of course I think there's tons of value in them, but it's like, you know, there is an open door there to make sure that, you know, it's not like that Connor's trying to sneak in and sort of
Oh,
like
Yeah, before we
grab the
go to
world.
no, Brett, let me
Yeah.
jump in. Before we go to Cub and Crypto Voyager, who got their hand up, thank you kindly. I want to jump at Brett. So thank you. I wanted to bring up somebody that looks like that knows a little bit about the law, or maybe more than a little bit, and about governance as well. He and I got a chance to meet in person there in London for the first time. And you know, he's been going to that's Gregory Ward, and he's actually been on the forefront on the ground. And Casey's been letting me know about what's going on the forefront of actually talking to I don't know if it's him or Bryan, but you know, him or Bryan Daugherty, one of the two, have actually been talking to more of the regulators on this stuff. So I'd like to get what he thinks, and ultimately, you know, if he maybe what we were talking about here, Gregory, before you just to kind of fill you in, it was like ultimately doing doing an actual stage where we get speakers together. And today isn't like the full on debate. We just want to like propose something. We got Michael Scott, Ian Grigg, Crypto Voyager, Cub, all who could be great speakers against and opposing the DAR so far. And we got about 4 or 5 who could be for. And I want to know what your thoughts are if you're able to unmute.
Yeah.
How you doing, Gregory? Good to see you.
Great to hear your voice, Gavin. Thanks for having me up. You know, it's such an interesting topic across the board, I think, and I certainly don't have the answers for what should be or not be, but I think that it's interesting when you think about various topics, such as like, as people, we want enforceability of contracts, right? We want the enforceability of the contracts we make, and so if we have a way for a system, a mechanism to do that. So if you created a contract and bought a car from somebody, they didn't hand over the car title to you, you'd want the court to talk to the DMV and say, hey, hand the car title over to the rightful owner, right? You want enforceability of contracts. And so I think that as far as that goes within a digital asset recovery, on one hand, I don't know aspects of what should or should not be within that. Like if we're talking about the native token of Bitcoin, that might be one thing. If you're talking about one sat or something where you're creating a new transaction or making something, what is the updated state of things is really where I think that main thing that DAR should be recognizing or people should be recognizing is a majority of the things we're probably going to be doing is referencing off-chain activities, trusts, enforceability of contracts, deeds of land, and therefore I think that a lot of these things will be a court saying, hey, the ledger represented this contract and such entity should recognize and enforce the contract. As far as movement of things on the chain, I don't know. It's I guess my push against that for to play the opposite side would be the confiscation of gold in 1933. You have aspects of property rights, like I think Brett was alluding to it. So if you have the forefathers saying, look, we had issues with people encroaching upon people's rights and people's property rights, and they're going to do all sorts of mechanisms, all sorts of trickeries, all sorts of fraudulent house of cards, fictional entities to get you to vote away your property rights. And so you might have a situation where the people say, hey, by democratic vote, we choose that we're going to allocate XYZ amount of Bitcoin, of everybody's Bitcoin, to this common pool. But you didn't vote for it, but DAR recognizes that law and reassigns your coins. And so I think that that could be an issue. Again, if you have the abilities for, and I'm not saying that if I was a node operator, I would want to be in the face of adversity with the government entity telling me do or die, right?
And
Do this.
And Gregory, you've been in the courtroom, you know, a bunch of times, and you've had disputes, and from our conversation, you've in the past maybe had some issues with governance from your prior you know, experiences. So, you know, how does this apply to your own principles and your experiences?
Well, I think, you know, to use some words, I think that there's code and there's law. Law to me is basically two prongs, which is you have property and your personal, your property rights. So I say your body and your property. Nobody should violate another body's personal property or their body or their property. So that's trespass. And then you have contract law, which is every man, woman, you know, maybe you want to say above 18, has the right, God-given right, to create contracts with each other. And so we create these systems to enforce these contracts. The problems is that we've seen is that the systems today have created overlays of contractual obligations that the people are unaware of. And so they're interfacing with each other and with the system in ways that have subverted their original property rights. And so I think that's the things that you and I were talking about in the courtrooms, is that people come into these systems and they're already in a disadvantaged position of the role that they're playing in relationship to their own God-given rights. And I think that the majority, 99% of the world is at that state. And so I think that's how we need to redefine, if we're going, as we start to redefine Bitcoin, utilizing it for common benefit, if you want to call it that, trust law, and starting to redefine and recreating society that interact with each other in these transparent, right? We could utilize this transparent ledger to redefine some of the systems that we interact with each other. And I think you know, a lot of that stuff doesn't even require tremendous amounts of money. It's just, I think it's just the ways we interact with each other. The system is really a house of cards in so many ways anyway. It's a belief system in the current dollars anyway.
Greg, one of the points that Crypto Voyager brought up, and he's got his hand up, and I'd love to hear him come up or just to recap on it, and that is that potentially the DAR is creating the potential for a chargeback like situation and a condition on each transaction to where it no longer is cash. Crypto Voyager, is that a summary of what you were saying?
Yeah, the DAR removes the finality,
right?
That Bitcoin had beforehand. We have on BTC you have removed the finality because you have RBF. So there you have to wait at least one block. The minority hash situation that we have in BSV right now basically tells you that your finality is in around 200 blocks, because we haven't seen out in the wild reorgs attacks for longer than that. So 200 blocks is your finality. 1 day. Competition is finality is, I believe, something like 3 or 4 weeks, which would be credit cards. But if the DAR takes hold, then there is no finality at all, because some guy, okay, fine, there's a statute of limitation finality. Okay, so once you have reached the statute of limitation finality, you can be sure that the thing that you have is yours. So after 10 years, you can be sure that whatever digital item you have is still yours. Okay, that's something that I don't like about the DAR, that it removes the finality.
Brilliant. That's great insight.
The possession of the 9/10 of the law.
Yep.
Okay, because there is suddenly an entity, and we're still gonna have to talk about how exactly that entity is being governed by who. Again, who is it then when push comes to shove? Yeah, for whatever reason, yeah, push comes to shove. Is it then Switzerland? Is it the state of Switzerland with the where the thing is situated, or is it the UN? Because suddenly we're talking about some geopolitically interesting digital goods. Yeah, so it is a kind of worms
Yeah.
for me. It's a can of worms.
So
That's the DAR. That's the DAR. And
now,
to the question, oh yeah, sent an email
Connor,
Connor Murray, and tell him what you don't like about whatever you're reading now in the NAR. We have a team of lawyers. They went through it, but if you have something, you can say something. I can tell you right now what I don't like about the contract of the NAR, and that is basically the salvatory clause. Yeah, there's a clause in there, there's a whole contract that says we reserve the right to change anything that has been written here. Yeah, so that sentence alone basically tells me, since I do not know how the power, or conspiratorial, the powers that be are arranged in that thing, and suddenly that thing is there. Again, that's too much power, and as the saying goes, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts
nice.
absolutely.
Before
So
you answer that, let's go
that
back.
is why that is why I see the DAR the NAR kind of murky.
Okay. Now, Greg, do you see your thoughts on his summary there about the two concepts, please?
Yeah, no, I love the insight and the thoughts. I think that there's place probably for both, right? I think that there's, if you were to make a purchase of some sort and you didn't get delivery of goods, then you'd want to have the abilities to make a complaint and have, I mean, certainly it would be nice if, right, for your own self, I mean, for everybody always wants for their own selves to be able to get their money back, typically, when it comes to a system. But as far as, like, if someone, I mean, pays for a music stream, let's say, and they get their delivery of goods immediately, to me, there should be no that should be a cash transaction and no chargebacks. So I think that's those casual payments were amazing for Bitcoin and allowed all sorts of ease within business and remove those frictions. But again, I think that hopefully, if in this DAR situation, it would be a difficult process. I mean, within reason, right? It wouldn't just be able to be a phone call to the BA, and you get the charges put on hold. They don't get their payment.
One thing you missed earlier, Greg, which I'm going to summarize, Michael Scott, he's not here anymore, but what he was talking about, and who else was mentioning it as well? Ultimately, Ian Grigg apparently was involved with EOS, and Michael Scott was recapping on this EOS situation, and they did something similar where they had this digital asset recovery group. And Michael Scott's claim is that it really, really screwed them up really bad, and it messed things up. And, because there was a lot of people filing claims saying, hey, I lost my EOS coins. I need to get them back, everybody. And they had so many claims, and it clogged their system up, I guess. So
I can only imagine.
Yeah. I mean,
And here's another interesting point. I think that we've all been a party to the conversation of, which is this whole idea of, when we came into Bitcoin, there are a lot of scammers. There are, and so you started to get this be on your P's and Q's, and then you started having this idea of, hey, I could watch out for my own self. And so there's an interesting dialogue in between those two ideas of the parent state who wants to look out for you, and you should just be aware of the relationships you get involved in and the businesses that you pay money to, and maybe allowing qualified reviews and different things of different people and different businesses, allow that to guide people's business decisions rather than having more of a parent state with court enforcement.
now, Greg, it seems like I've seen you in pictures inside of, was it Congress or what? It was regulatory agencies. Were you with Bryan going into Congress?
Yeah, we had a DC demo day for BSV applications maybe 3 months ago.
Did this
And so
conversation, yeah, what did you talk about there?
I mean, everything from you know, how BSV blockchain and scalable blockchain technology is more than just cryptocurrency. How it could be used, this immutable ledger with private key attestation, could be used from everything from right, agriculture, like we're like Alex Mann is doing with our Smart Grow Agritech partnership, with grabbing, you know, environmental data on chain, to cybersecurity, being able to take log data and putting on chain, and what else? I mean, just I think Nchain was there showing off their digital signatures. Token Innovate was there showing off their platform for derivatives trading, and so basically just teaching, if you will, educating the lawmakers on that this is not just about a trading cryptocurrencies and basically the idea of fintech across the board, right? There's a lot of conversations about everything fintech. We need custodial wallets. We need to regulate everybody from top to bottom, because this is a financial crimes, financial terrorism situation, right? If we don't get everybody's identification using a blockchain, then they might send money and it might be a financial terrorist funding, right? So they're thinking in terms of all this stuff. We're trying to teach them it's a much greater thing. It's just a big old global immutable ledger, right? That you have access to, and you're able to interact with each other in a new way, very cheaply. And so I think that was the main thing that we were bringing to them, and hopefully they were able to at least come away with some.
Was it like a line, like a line of different blockchains and cryptocurrencies, one after another, going to them, or was it just you guys?
No, so that one particularly was sponsored by the BA. Bryan, on behalf of the BA, had been in contact with a lot of those legislators and their staff members for the past few years, really just kind of going there a few times a year, meeting with them, meeting with their staff, educating them. They would ask him about different current events and what, you know, his thoughts were on it. And so this kind of culminated in this demo day where we spent the day with the congressional staff and teaching them about some of these applications.
Did anybody ask any intelligent questions like that were?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, yeah, I mean, actually some of the younger staffers especially were very insightful as far as just technology. And so there were certainly no dumb questions. If there were no I don't know. There was no gossipy questions. There was no cryptocurrency based questions as far as number go up. It was really actually very, very educational, the conversation.
Nice. Okay, so Cub, before we go back to you, no, Crypto Voyager with his hand up, I want to add in Cam. It looks like you're on the stage now, buddy. How you doing, my man? Good to see you again.
Yeah, good. To be honest, I do not know that much about the NAR and the DAR, but today I was debating with a BTC guy about the difference between lost coins and stolen coins, because Satoshi said that lost coins cannot be recovered, but he also said that the quote, "Imagine if gold could be turned into lead," referring to freezing coins, right? And so I think what this discussion ultimately has to do with is disincentivizing corruption and criminality, because the way that I think of BSV, like ideally, if it's integrated into the internet, the game theory works where there is no incentive to steal someone's coins, right? And that's what the beauty of it is that sure, you can have that. It's almost like solving a chicken and an egg problem. It's like, sure, you can have that. It's almost like you need that fallback mechanism before the egg hatches to give security to the public, or like to give a sense of security to the nations that are going to be using it, so that it can weed out corruption. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
You made a really deep point. I'm not sure I understand it. You're saying that there's, if the game theory works, then there's no incentive to steal the coins. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's like the way that I see it, it's like, well, if you it's like you're going to get caught, so there's no reason to cheat the system. Like it almost it disincentivizes people from even trying to cheat the system, and the more that you can get that message across, the more people will realize there's no reason to cheat each other, and then that will kind of get rid of all this paranoia that we have that keeps us, like questioning things, and then we can just enjoy life.
Keeps us in fear.
Yeah, because we're not quite out. We're not there where BSV has integrated into the internet, and it's this nice, fun game theory where we have this sense of security. We don't have to have insecurity anymore. But until we get there, we're going to have those insecurities. And not to say that we shouldn't question these things. I'm learning a lot just from this discussion about this stuff. But I love that idea that there is no incentive to cheat the system because of the game theory.
Fascinating. Okay.
And so
Go ahead. Something else? Yeah.
Asset recovery thing, that's the way that I see that. That's more so like if there's a criminal thing happening, like freezing the coins. Is that ultimately what we're talking about?
Well, Crypto Voyager's point was that, and ultimately what we're talking about is really setting up a speakers panel so that people who really, really, really are super intelligent, have a very thorough understanding of this, can talk on both sides, because that's where we're at. Like, people want to know. There was Michael Scott did a poll, and everybody in the community is split almost 50-50. 50 says they want it, 50 says they don't want it. So we were trying to get a panel together with people who are very educated and informed on both sides so that we can hear from them. And, Crypto Voyager's point was that, in opposition is that it potentially creates a unsettled transaction and no longer becomes cash. That is a summary of a point that he made regarding the DAR. And it's new to me. So, Crypto Voyager, your hand's up, buddy, if you want to chime in on that. All right. Or is it? Yeah.
I didn't know that my hand was up. I just wanted to say, whoever was talking about the system doesn't allow for corruption. I would like to say yes, but I won't get to see that. I think that would take 100 or 200 years more for that knowledge and that insight to settle in. Meanwhile, we're gonna have to accept the evil in the world, and so it can be done also on BSV. There is nothing stopping it.
Nice.
Okay. Just saying.
Cub, your hand's up, buddy. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I wanted to come back to Greg Ward here and some of the things he was saying. Another Gregory here jumping in the conversation, but in regard to sort of different
Do your best to
sides.
speak up a little bit too.
Okay, I'm coming closer, so hopefully that's a little better. I see, from what I've heard as well in the comments, two sides. It's the issue of, is it court enforced or law enforced versus is it BSV enforced? Because if it's law and court enforced, then it's national and the jurisdiction is a country, versus if it's a BSV enforced, and maybe enforced is not the right term, maybe it's alerted, BSV alerted, right? That's global. And I'm definitely agree with the issue raised here with Crypto Voyager about the finality, but I wanted to raise this issue because it impinges exactly on this triple entry accounting, which to me is basically the whole deal, because the association itself has to fit into this triple ledger. What is it? And the original definition, and this goes back over 100 years in the 1870s, is that it's a perpetual inventory, which basically means that you can have anytime auditing. And I bring that in because you can have conditions where it's like there's a delay, right? And on certain purchases or in certain transactions, okay, delay is fine. On other transactions, that's not acceptable, right? The finality has to be there quickly. So I think there's a whole bunch of sort of rules and operations and normal habits of behavior in the ecosystem of exactly what someone just said. I have to give up something to be part of it. I have to sacrifice something to be part of it. Is it a contract? Maybe, but I'm not signing contracts for everything in my life, right? That's another issue. So where are the limits of these smart contracts that are going to come into a whole bunch of new things, right, with this digital smart economy? In regard to this, what Voyager said, the Connor salvatory clause, I think a lot more needs to be done. But this is just me with my sociologist hat on, in terms of other than Calvin, Stefan, and the third person I forget, I think he's Swiss. Other than that, what is the BSVA? Is it a DAC, a decentralized autonomous corporation, the way not an organization? Dr. Wright clarified this corporation, and if not, why not? Right.
Brett,
So
do you
what
wanna,
is it?
okay. Do you want to have Brett answer that, or maybe go back to Greg because you mentioned both of them here, kind of. So
Yeah, either or. And I was going to ask Greg, what is his relationship with BSVA? So, but I think that's perfect for either of them. Yeah.
well, Greg, are you? Yeah. What is your relationship, please?
Yeah. So I have no official position with the BSVA. As I stated earlier, Bryan, does work with the BSVA, and I just happen to be a part of Smart Ledger, which is a company that him, myself, Bryan, and Ava founded several years back. So no, I don't have an official position. I just happen to be somebody who's, I guess, works alongside of Bryan, so I get to be a part of a lot of conversation, and as you stated, have had a deep interest in the law for many years. And from the moment I got into BSV, that was something that I saw BSV being applicable to, is utilizing for various purposes in that way.
Greg,
And I do agree with the last comments as far as jurisdictional. I think, as just a side note, when you're talking about native tokens and we're talking about a single ledger, then jurisdictional or not, it's going to be updated across the world. And if not, then you're going to split the chain, right? You're going to have ones that are paying attention to a certain jurisdictional thing, especially if you're talking like millions of dollars. Let's say they confiscate like Russian dollars or something, and then all of a sudden we have miners in Russia, miners here. You're going to have a split. Not that I'm would be against that split, but you know what I'm saying.
nice. Okay, Brett, before I go to Brett really quick, Greg, it seems like, your area, you have so much that you are specialized in and you are very advanced in. Like, what would you say that, what is your contribute, what are you doing with Smart Ledger? Like, what is your specialty in that? Like, what are you excelling at? Like,
Sure. So I guess officially, other than being a co-founder, I'm Chief Development Officer. So as we look at applicability of use cases over the last number of years, I'm the one that puts together the MVPs and then either brings that to life in a greater version or brings it to another team of developers to take it to a more professional veneer, if you will.
so you manage the developers, or you actually are the technical officer, or both?
I'm the chief development officer, whatever that specifically means, I guess I wear many hats, but because we're a small team and agile and we're all kind of creatives, if you will, we just all work together to iterate over use cases. We work with a lot of different partners in different industries, artists and musicians and different people. Again, Alex Mann within the hemp and the IoT world. And so we'll get together and we'll just generate ideas over how we could apply, again, private public key attestation, right, of parties. So a lot of it comes down, you'll hear me say a lot in a lot of conversations, it comes down to identity and utilizing that ledger for attestation and notarization of activities, right? So you might have token transfers, but it doesn't have to be token transfers that causes legal obligations and legal property rights to ensue, right? I could create a ledger entry that says I sell Gavin my vehicle, and as long as, you know, I mean, I have an identity that's associated with my private key pair, I could sign an attestation and create a contract, place that on chain and be enforceable in a court of law. So again, you know, we're just looking at how we could utilize these cool properties of blockchain, BSV specifically, and applying it in different industries. So I'll be the one that gets in the lab then and starts building the applications.
All right. Now someone showed me something yesterday, Greg. This is right on point. And you know, here you are, we're meeting it. This is divine. This is perfect. So it was a company or a website called streamable.fm. I went on there and I clicked on it. I logged in with my ham cash. I bought or rented a song, played the song. Then I went to my hand cash wallet, and apparently it sent you and Bryan and a bunch of other total of 6 people microtransactions and Satoshis for the royalties on the song. And I was like, well, yeah. What is that?
Yeah.
How is that possible? You know, is that something you worked on?
That is true, and so that is actually something that we're working on, bringing the newest editions over the next several months of those applications. But so we have kind of brother sister pair of applications within that. Rare Generation is the publishing application that allows you to publish a song, apply different rights holders, you know, publisher rights to. I mean, as you know, you could split a penny down to 3,000, 4,000 times. And so you could, I tell people all the time, you could look, if you could register on this platform and you could split up publishing between your entire neighborhood that you grew up with, right? You could split it between an entire organization of kids. And so, as you said, yeah, it costs less than just 9/10 of a penny, I believe. It might be less now because BSV is down. But then the payment gets split instantly.
So if somebody wants to upload a song to that, can they make money as a content creator, or is that the concept, or what is it?
Yep, absolutely. So it's basically a Spotify-like experience, other than the content is streamed. You have to pay, you know, like I said, just slightly less than a penny to listen to the music, and whoever you assign rights holders to when you registered it would get paid instantly.
Wow. Well, man, thank you. It's not really I mean, maybe it's on topic. I don't know if it's on topic to this panel or not, potentially, but I just ran across it and here we are talking. So I just thought it was amazing that you guys are splitting that on a smart contract, I guess. Is that right? Is it smart contract?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, and quite honestly, just I won't try to take too much longer than 30 seconds to mention the topic, which I think is applicable, which is, so we in BSV for years, we've talked about like just in that application, hey, you can split payments instantly. But the truth of the matter is, like, as we talked about jurisdiction to jurisdiction, they're going to want to know, as an application developer, who's making money on your application. How much money do they make an application? Because after a certain threshold, it becomes a FinCEN alerted activity, right? They're going to say, yo, these guys made $500. These guys made $5,000. Who are these guys? Are they not Al Qaeda? How do I know that these guys didn't throw a song on and their Al Qaeda supporters funded it for an American and posted it as music streams, right? And I'm making these points to say, these are the places they will absolutely go very soon with every application that's people making money on. And so these things are touching all these different areas. And again, it maybe even touches the early part of my conversation, which is, what is money? What are we defining as the benefit of, you know, I mean, the end of the transaction? Because if it is BSV, or if it is something like financial, then that is something that most likely every application will run up against, at least in America.
Then we're going to have some sort of governance required, sounds like. So Brett, you never got a chance to respond to the other stuff. If you want to chime back in, I'd love to hear from you, buddy. You know, there were some questions, I think, from was it Crypto? No, Cub. If you're on, Brett. If anybody else wants to jump up, we're going to start winding down here soon. So it looks like Bryan joined us. If he wants to request a space there, Mila and Casey, please bring him up. And Brett, yeah, you're up, buddy. Good, good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I just wanted to say I really loved what you said, Greg. I love that, you know, we talk about smart contracts and things like this, and it's important that we remember that contract is an essential component of smart contracts, right? And so, you know, but contracts can be exactly like you said, we just want enforceability. That doesn't necessarily, they can be enforceable through lots of different mechanisms. And so yeah, I think that you know, the enforceability of contract law is part of the applicability of private law. And you know, it's something that that I think that is a really important point, because you know, it really touches on the concept of sovereignty and the concept of agency, right? The concept of a life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness, the ability to you know, to formulate your own private contracts and say, hey, me and my private community, we decided that we want to, you know, live this way, we want to do this. It's not impinging or infringing on anyone else's property or their rights to happiness, etc. And the blockchain is a mechanism to automate that, but I don't think the blockchain necessarily by default is a replacement for all existing contract, right? It's just another layer upon which the bedrock and the existing bedrock of existing private contract law can be applied. And so that's where I think these, you know, these terms and conditions come in, because it's really just about the way in which the existing contractual laws, et cetera, can interface with this new layer that can be really important for automating and speeding them up, but also doesn't necessarily replace them. So where you say, okay, well, you know, that's just what the blockchain says. So if the blockchain says it, then it's valid, or it must be true, or something like that. You know, and I just, one of the last things I want to add is just, if you're sitting at your computer right now, just open up another tab and just Google the alert system and the value overflow incident, because a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, especially as it relates to Bitcoin, we're talking about some other layers too as well, but especially when it comes to you know, the Bitcoin side of it, you know, we see that this goes back, and one of the things that we include, we talk about the network access rules, the digital recovery, digital asset recovery, as well as the alert system. The alert system sometimes gets left out, but that is a component of this as well. And we do see that the alert system was instituted by Satoshi in response to that value overflow incident, where the Bitcoin network was compromised, not by any external actor or agent that was seeking to subvert it from the outside in, but it subverted itself from the inside out, just because of the fact that not all code is perfect. And so all of a sudden, you know, the intention of the network to have 21 million Bitcoins forever as a key component of that protocol, that set in stone protocol that's necessary for us to plan and to have, you know, an assurance about what actions we can take now today, with the understanding that they're going to be valid and be secure in the future. The value overflow incident came and sort of like, you know, changed all that. And so Satoshi did see a need for an alert system that could indicate to nodes, hey, you know, this is a breach of the network, and you know, we need to act in concert to be able to restore the network back to its original design, et cetera. And that's just a necessary condition for the fact that we're trying to build a perfect implementation, but we have imperfect mechanisms to deliver that. So, you know, again, I also, you know, I think that so important to this is these conversations that we're having. I really want to thank everyone for inviting me on to discuss this stuff, and to just say that, you know, any advancement and progress that we make today, we can, you know, we can probably get a little bit farther along down the road tomorrow, and we'll continue to do that, because it's not something that you just set and forget, and then you know, liberty or whatever is secured, contractual, you know, private contracts, et cetera, are secured forever. You know, you always need to be going back and revisiting and rethinking and applying critical thinking to making sure that basically, you know, that the system itself isn't able to subvert away from those goals and those intentions. And it's the ability to be real and to say, hey, like, if we if if the system itself moves away from these goals, then it's the system that becomes the outside attacker, right? You know, the system, you know, you don't want to put all of your faith blindly in anything. Bitcoin is great, but, you know, I don't put my faith blindly in Bitcoin. You know, I have a deeper faith and a deeper unshakable ground that that Bitcoin touches, but you know, it touches in the same way that a lot of things can touch as well. And it's important to always reconnect back with that and to talk about that with other participants so that we can ensure that we're preserving the right things. We're not preserving the network for the network's sake. We're preserving the network because it gives us the best mechanism through which to advance these deeper goals that we have as a society, as a people.
Yeah, right on. Nice point, Brett. Way to go, man. I love it. Well, let's go up. Okay, anybody, I wanted to, just before I go over to Bryan, I just want to kind of recap on the what we've been talking about here, and then which was the proposing a speakers panel about debating the network access rules. And we learned so far today that there are two separate components. There's the NAR and the DAR. It's not just the NAR. There's a whole separate component. And we have potentially from Michael Scott, who was running a full node on BitcoinSV. He's saying he would potentially be against it. He wanted to have Ian Grigg as well for the DAR on the stage, Crypto Voyager potentially as well. Cub was another one that talked about obviously potential coming up as against it for the DAR. And then we potentially have Connor,
Qualified,
Brett, Kurt, possibly. And now we want to hear what Bryan Daugherty has to say. So Bryan, welcome. We haven't met before, but my name's Gavin. Nice to meet you. Are you able to unmute?
Hey, Gavin. Hey, everybody. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. No, I only caught a portion of the conversation, but it looks like you have some of the masters of the universe on here with Greg and Brett for sure. I mean, Greg is very well rounded in all things blockchain. So really, I'm glad that you have somebody like him here as well as Brett to really advocate on some of the more rounded discussions. I mean, I think just generally speaking, you know, we have so many different time bombs, right, that are ready to go off at any given moment, and a minefield to navigate, not just, you know, on a technical roadmap, which it seems like we're, you know, well through a lot of the constraint period of that, but more so on the regulatory front. You know, from my perspective, I spend a great deal of time ensuring that there's a competitive atmosphere for BSV to actually take off and be adopted by enterprises and governments around the world. You know, I've worked with over 34 different governments at this point. In the last couple of years, we've been successful in demonstrating the technology, you know, even on Capitol Hill just a couple months ago, as well as, you know, through various bills and regulatory aspects. I stay away from a lot of the financial conversation. However, I'm been knee deep in it in the last 3 months with the Tillis-Haggerty illicit finance bill. And really what that does is advocate for the more powers for the Bank Secrecy Act, which pretty much governs almost all financial transactions today. So if you remember a few months ago in the EU, they actually put a ban on non-custodial wallets. So any non-custodial wallet that receives over £1,000 must register KYC. You know, it was believed that that was never going to be done there. You know, it's believed that it's not going to be done here. However, that is not the case. You know, I know we're talking about digital
how is that
assets.
enforceable? Hi, Bryan. The EU thingy that now non-custodial wallets are prohibited. How is that enforceable since a wallet is just basically a number?
Yeah, you and I both understand this concept, but you have to understand that most of the politicians, policymakers, regulators around the world, right, still conflate this idea of crypto and blockchain. They still conflate what they've done, you know, through the guise of law enforcement, where they have to put, they have to use a third party. To them, that's what they have to do. They don't understand that in the guise of digital asset recovery, and what I recommend is that, they don't build out an entire framework as they have been. I think, there's too much contention and not enough attention to the actual definitions of these terms, right? What is a crypto asset? What is a digital asset? What are these things first, right? Before we start regulating
They're
them.
not defined in law.
They're
A
not
lot of them.
defined in
Yeah.
law, and they're not defined today. Blockchain today is not defined. Now, digital asset is defined. Digital asset was just recently defined as any cryptograph or any token sent over a cryptographically secured distributed ledger system. So now this creates a predicament for the actual framework that's being discussed, which has really garnered a lot of support from Democrats. Only 16 were supposed to vote on it. Well over 36 supported the last, the vote on it. So when you think about what this does is, it requires listen closely, it requires any transaction from an application, whether financial or data driven, right? They just data orientated, that they would have to register with FinCEN or a like agency to be established prior to spinning up a public-private key pair, right? Now that, for applications like CertaHash, which is just 100% focused on data-driven transactions, there's no real financial value. I mean, you can always, draw out what financial value is, but when it comes down to the definition of digital asset, it is any asset that is sent over a secured distributed ledger system. So, that creates a problem for any enterprise application who wants to set out to solve a problem like Sentinel Node, which mitigates the detection time of a data breach from the average 220 days to near instant. Now that's a valuable problem, and it goes back to what blockchain solves is the prevention of fraud. Fraud is the greatest cost to any business, right? And so when you just boil it all down, I mean, we're really providing the auditability and transparency of events. But the problem with this law that potentially is, gaining even more support is the fact that it will, in fact, push non-custodial wallets to, an alcohol prohibition status, which will just go underground. And my argument to them, right, is that, hey, if you were listening, because a lot of this, almost all of it, is under the guise of evading sanctions and illicit finance by terrorist organizations, right? Just very, very much like the example that Greg gave. So my perspective on this is you would not, if you had the idea that this terrorist cell was using this cell phone network, shut off the network. You would listen to that network to the latest possible time that you could intercede and prevent something from happening. At least you would know what was happening. And beyond that, I mean, if a terrorist cell wanted to create their own stable token based upon, barrels of oil, slave women, and AK-47s, they very much could, right? So I'll stop there because I see that
No,
there's
it's really
a hand
good,
there.
Bryan. That's super good. I love it, man. We Michael's back. If he wants to jump back up, Michael, feel free to. Did you want to, comment on that, Greg? And any thoughts to chime in on before we go to the other gentleman? Looks like Cub, you got your hand back up. So he mentioned
No,
you.
I won't take up more space, but I'd love hearing Bryan speak on those topics because he makes perfectly, very, very good points on the topic.
And ultimately, the regulatory stuff, Bryan, is why we have you here. I mean, I'd like to keep it short on the just keep it to questions right now before we chime into a lot of commentary for if you guys have your hands up. Bryan, do you with the regulatory stuff? So you're working in Congress a lot. Is that your thing right now? You're mostly in DC talking to the legislatures and in Congress?
I wish it was just that. It's actually kind of much more wider than that, which is a good thing. It requires a lot of hands, unfortunately. So I do a great deal of work both in DC, so both on the House and Senate side. I typically go there once a month, having 6 or more meetings a day for 3 or 4 days in a row. And my counterparts, say at Coinbase, who's not having an issue with the Tillis-Haggerty bill because they don't care about data, and likely it's not a big deal to them, and these bills could be far worse as far as what they're concerned. They bring a slate of maybe 8 or 9, you know, 8 or 9 people, along with a few lawyers, and are able to do weeks worth of work compared to what I can do in my month. However, I like to say that the rational thought that we provide is much more easy to uptake than what they're forced to deal with the likes of, say, Sam Bankman-Fried, who spent about $80 million in DC and wasn't able to get a bill, and we were able to participate in over 2 bills without spending a dollar outside of sending me there. But my work also deals with on the municipal and the state side. So in New York State, there's a moratorium. And again, this is one of these landmines, right? There's a moratorium on proof of work. There's been one for 2 years. It's just coming up, to maturity here in November. So I'm working with the governor's office to potentially work with them to, teach them on sustainability. I also work with various agencies across the globe. So I work a little bit with Interpol, helping them with everything from digital asset recovery to just blockchain enabled utility. And I work on the municipal side because on both the state and municipal side, there's a lot of activity and really economic opportunity for adoption of this technology, simply due to the lack of guidance and direction on the federal side. So states like Wyoming and others are very open, Texas, whereas though there are other states like New York that do have these proof of work bans that could spread to other states. So it's really important that I put a lot of thumbs in the dam to make sure nothing negative happens, while also encouraging more open opportunities for these type of applications. And just simply, I see a hand, but let me just highlight some of the things that we've been able to do, which was share language on the U.S. Farm Bill, to add an amendment to really look at agritech and blockchain and how that makes an impact for U.S. local farmers and their constituents. That was actually something that was done, and it's in the process now. We've also consulted quite a bit on the National Defense Authorization Act and how blockchain intercedes with information security technology. I've done a lot of work with Homeland Security and other agencies to really try to give them the recipe that blockchain provides to give us a national competitive advantage. I mean, I think we all know, the likes of China and other countries are starting to use this technology, and it's a key piece for data integrity and information security. Whether you're talking AI or any other emerging technology. So, but
Right. So it
again,
seems
that's
like you'd be an advocate for the NAR and the DAR. So is that the case? And if so, would you be open to doing a panel in a debate with people who are against it in a civil way, in the future?
Yeah, I mean, as far as digital asset recovery, it's all about the execution. Like right now, the execution, if this law passes, it would force law enforcement to work with the likes of precarious exchanges that may be doing their own criminal mischief, right, to facilitate a lawful order, which seems kind of strange way of going about it, but that's how law enforcement has always engaged lawful orders, is by utilizing a third party. Well, what is one thing that blockchain provides? It provides a way to, mitigate the heavy use of third parties. So what I advocate for digital asset recovery is simply, and this is even to the policymakers that I meet with, is, let's not get into the weeds of XYZ, but rather let's just simply say there are stewards out there, protocol maintainers, right? These people, just like the BSV Association is a steward of the blockchain, right? Of the BSV blockchain. So, you simply just make a law that requires some way to facilitate digital asset recovery without prescribing, the due mechanism of saying how you have to do that. But I think that, regardless of how anybody feels, technology does not, no matter what the technology is, does not, break hundreds of years of law, right? Especially, something as cornerstone as property law. And, we should be looking for ways to use this technology to facilitate, the transparent, right? I'll go back to what I said earlier, removing the fraud from this decision-making process or any other way, right? So there's a lot of ways that we can use the technology. We all talk about it, but even in our own ecosystem, what companies are using the technology themselves. Which ones are using triple injury accounting? Which ones are using Sentinel Node? Which ones are using any of these, incredible applications that have true utility and a value proposition?
No, seems like really a lot. Okay, so basically, you're talking about how it could be the NAR, or I'm sorry, the DAR. It really is. It wouldn't be necessary if there could be something passed through Congress and there would be a digital asset recovery program in a law. Is that your point?
I don't really want, no, actually, I wouldn't prescribe the mechanism. I would just simply say, look, if you're a steward of a blockchain protocol, whether that be BTC, whether that be Solana, whether that be Ethereum, BSV, it doesn't matter. You're a steward, right? You have a fiduciary responsibility to those people using it, right? And if that is the case, then, a simple, regulation or law that states we require some manner of digital asset recovery for the users in case they lose their property. How that happens? Look, every chain has it's a sandbox, right? Let's not think that there's one way is the best way. Let's look at ways that this technology can be, implemented to protect people's property rights. I mean, it comes down to property rights. As far as network access rules, I think, again, that is something that's more in-house within the protocol stewards to release, that it's no different than, say, actually, it's much more profound than just, say, a white paper. And, there's accountability to this. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but, if you at least have network access rules, then there's rules to play by. And if you don't like those rules, you don't have to play there, right? But the reality is, property rights are a cornerstone of law, and that we need to be able to protect them no matter what the technology is. And if a new technology comes in another 30 years, like the internet or blockchain or AI, are we just going to erase 80 years worth of law because there's something new?
No, it doesn't work that way.
No.
Laws bedrock.
Yeah, and we'll never do that, right? I mean, it's never going to happen. So I think I've been surprised. I say never going to happen. I've been super surprised over really a lot of the Ethereum SEC stuff and some of the Ripple SEC stuff. I've been just really kind of surprised at some of these. Obviously, the right case I thought was extremely interesting for so many different reasons. But yeah, no, I think it's a great discussion to have, and I think we have to take this discussion outside of just BSV because it's really not something that's happening, say, within the crypto sphere. But again, this is a reality that's, chugging down the tracks right now with multiple different bills that require on both sides of the pond digital asset frameworks that include digital asset recovery. I spent a week in Bavaria last October at Interpol Emerging Technologies Conference, where that was the number one topic, was digital asset recovery. What frameworks can they provide to various countries and law enforcement agencies to facilitate, digital asset recovery of people's property rights.
Brian, what do you say now to Michael Scott's point? He hasn't come back up to speak yet, but if he does, please add him, Casey and Mehl. And that was his point, was that Ian Grigg had been involved in EOS. Are you there, Michael?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thank you, Brian, for joining. I actually had sent Gavin you as kind of one of the thought leaders to kind of invite. So that's awesome that you were able to kind of join. So really appreciate everything you're doing. So yeah, the only concern I really had was just maybe getting Ian Grigg involved in some lessons learned as far as the DAR piece, considering he did work on this with the EOS project. And say what you want about that blockchain, they did run into kind of a lot of issues with the actual arbitration process that kind of undermined the whole end goal of the of the project. So I think the regulatory environment is extremely important, relevant, and central to the discussion, and that's absolutely 100% correct. So being able to balance just all those variables, I think, is going to be something that's worth discussing, and that's really kind of what I was hoping to kind of bring out of this discussion. So just, I guess my question to Brian would be, Ian Grigg, obviously he's the champion of BSV. Have you guys ever talked to him about maybe some things you had learned from that kind of implementation of the DAR?
I have not personally. I have not done, believe it or not, I don't do a lot with digital asset recovery. I did early on, but I haven't done a lot with it in the last year and a half. I know it's undergone all sorts of just changes as far as the way that they thought it out, which I definitely encourage. I don't think that there was a solid answer that we had at the time, although I think, there are different options available right now. I'm really excited about some of the entities that I'm aware of over the last year that have really started focusing in on this piece of being that arbitrator. And an honest arbitrator. I think that's, important. And now obviously a lot of this is based on reputation, and I hope that these companies are able to really kind of take that, lead as thought leadership there. But as far as, one of the things that you said that I think isn't highlighted enough here is, look, all of these technologies, we talk about adoption, but they're only going to be adopted when there's compliance, ISO compliance, SOC 2 compliance, right? Why is that important? Because businesses want to make sure that there's not some backdoor in the code. So we have to ensure that we're working towards in creating standards and adhering or creating or improving upon some of these standards that are available today. And that is the opening door to adoption, and but that also requires line by line, paper by paper, regulatory kind of backdrop of your entire system, your how you operate, who's involved, and everything. And so that it's a big challenge sometimes to kind of prepare all that. But once we do, I think once we kind of go that way, you're going to see all of these different worlds marry, from the regulation side to the technical side, right, to the arbitration side. all of them will have to marry, because you'll have various entities that are pushing that, whether it's the U.S. government, whether it's Interpol, whether it's, a Financial Action Task Force, whether it's the EU. They're all going to really want to have some digital global framework that kind of works in conjunction with each other, and that's not based on one blockchain. That's based on their view of the world of blockchain, which is primarily 80% crypto. And you're lucky if you can find, 2 out of 10 politicians today that know the difference between blockchain and cryptocurrency. So
Bryan,
there's a lot of education that needs to happen.
in your in your position as a advocate or a lobbyist, what are you advocating for in that future worldview to these agencies? What would you, if you could get in front of them, what are you advocating these agencies do, and they're coming together for all these blockchains? I mean, how do you see it playing out, or would you like to see it playing out?
I try to provide them some common sense, right? At least rational viewpoints. I try to approach any of the various differences, specifically in bills, because, every bill that comes out, I review it. I ensure, that I talk to the sponsors and all the supporters of that bill, and highlight where, the difference of narrative or difference of perspective, especially where it relates to the conflation of crypto and blockchain, kind of lie, right? And, specifically in the Tillis-Haggerty bill, for an example, I really focused on the definitions of digital asset and transactions. What is a valuable transaction versus a non-valuable transaction? So I really focus on those efforts. As far as trying to bridge the gap between, various agencies, they're all on their own different path. And, because of the churn and just different people that you are engaging with in these offices, because of, just moving around and about, it's very, you almost have to deal with them all in their own. At some point, they'll all get together. But at this point, right now, whether you talk about the UK, the EU, whether you talk about Asia or the US, there's not, general consensus of how to move forward. And a lot of it is based on the most minuscule things in the world. Like, I'll give you an example. My hardest job, any given meeting, is not saying the wrong word. So, giving an example of using a logistics application that, you can follow the life cycle of a product from, birth to recycling. If I said track and trace within that, when there was a Republican in the room, they wouldn't want anything to do with that, right? And it's just simply because of the word. And so that's where we're at. We're not down the road yet. We've got, I hate to say it, years. And so we need to look at things where we can find productive interaction. So the EU has had a sandbox for wallets over the last year. I think it's something every region should do, the US included. And so those are the, common sense things I try to put forth. And the same thing with the agritech bill. If we're going to look at sustainability and we're going to look at blockchain, or even in the case of New York, let's look at it right at let's take a look at those blockchains doing over 5,000 transactions per second or more. Let's not waste our time with anything else, right? So that way we have a true perspective of the scalability of these things. Now, these are fundamental because it really refocuses, right, on what's important. If Visa's doing 30,000 transactions on an average day, 70,000, 80,000 in the holidays, then we need to ensure whether this is the backbone or rail system for the financial system, right, or whether this is for data-driven transactions, for information security, for applications like Sentinel-Node. We need to make sure it's scalable, not just in a street, not just in a block, not just in the city, but not just even in the country, but across the globe.
Michael, did you have anything to add to this? Michael Scott? No? Well, if there's not anything else, then I'm going to motion that we close. It's about 10
Gavin, I've
o'clock
had my hand up
Eastern.
for a while. I'd love to jump in just a little bit.
Oh yeah, Cub, go ahead. If any last comments, I'm gonna motion that we close up. I know Brian's you sounds like you're a New Yorker. I can hear that. When you said York, New York, that means you are a native New Yorker. That's my interpretation. So that's a beautiful thing. Is that true?
I am a native New Yorker, but I'm actually living up here in the mountains of New Hampshire. So I'm in the live free or die state.
New Yorkers say the word New York a special certain way, and only if you're like, I don't know, maybe I picked up on that. Thank you, New Yorker. There he is. I love it. Well, I'm a Californian. So, yeah. Any Michael Scott or Greg or Cub or Crypto Voyager? Anybody else want to add anything?
Gavin,
Comments,
I'd love to
Please.
jump in.
Yeah.
I agree with Bryan. It's been a couple years since we spoke, Bryan, in regard to the DAR, because I believe the currently existing legal structures can adapt and adjust to this new digital economy and its requirements. So my concern again was, as before stated, was whether it's court enforced, that would be the jurisdiction that already exists, or whether it's BSV association enforced, because that's creating a totally new identity, which is an enforcement identity, and that's something very different. I wanted to ask Bryan, I don't know if you can maybe give a quick answer, and then I had a follow-up question just connecting also with what Greg said, but I asked Greg, so maybe you could answer as well, as what is your relationship with the BSVA, but with what Greg was saying in terms of enforceability, and because you validated it, Bryan, in terms of ledgers sharing information, that's different than having a token and a payment, but that's a business option as well. I wondered if that's possible, and if that would be something like time chain. I like how you use the word blockchain, and that was the language I was using a couple of years ago. You weren't talking much about Bitcoin, but it seems to me without a token, without the Bitcoin, there's a difference in terms of the enforceability. Because of course, if information is validated, that's great, it's traceable. But if you have the enforceability of the token, that's an additional layer. So just a couple thoughts out there. And Bryan, really glad you jumped in here, and hopefully we can get that panel going. Gavin?
Yeah, no, I love it. I love the thought pattern there. And I guess from my perspective, I don't try to prescribe any specific way on anyone right now. I think that, there is going to be quite a bit of education still, right? We're not anywhere close to talking about, the Byzantine generals problem, right? We have to back up even more so. And I deal a lot with the staffers, because they're the ones that stay, they're the ones that really do the majority of the grunt work on Capitol Hill. They're the ones that hammer out most of the deals for the policymakers. So, educating them has been like my number one focus over the last 3 years. And whether it's those, empowering those people that are, decision makers that have actual stake in the conversation, because it's not me, right? I don't really have a stakeholder in the conversation. I can only hope to play and be able to share a little bit of my narrative and perspective with them. And again, I emphasize the non-pragmatic side of policymaking. However, I try to kind of surgically go in and work in the areas that I know I can move the most or have the most impact. Digital
Do you do it on
asset
behalf of
recovery.
BSV? Do you do it on behalf of BSV, though, Bryan, if I may? I mean, how
I
do
do.
you
I
do it?
absolutely do. No, I am. It's 100% there. You know, I'm there on behalf of the BSV Association. I'm focused more so on the utility discussions rather than the financial discussions that are occurring. What I try to do in that area is just simply ensure that there's a fair and competitive, atmosphere for BSV to potentially be adopted. But as far as in the utility side of those discussions, I try to point them to the actual utility, show them whether it's through ebook, real world demonstrations like we had in Capitol Hill, or we're going to have another one in New York City soon, or, just, continually educating them and helping them work on some of the drafts and the bills that they're discussing, because they're not experts either, right? So
I guess we're doing that here in Canada too, and a few others. I've spoken with several members of Parliament here. There was a blockchain event recently here in Ottawa. I'm in the capital, so I do get access to them here. And the one who led the digital assets bill, Michelle Rempel, it was rejected. But it's they don't know how to go forward with this, and that's important to hear, that you're bringing forward, BSV specifically, not blockchain generally, because there is the message, of course. For me, it was Ian Grigg's triple entry accounting. That paper for me personally was more important than the Bitcoin white paper, just because of my background. I had an economics background, and the public notion of the ledger, because I did my PhD in sociology. It's like, wow, that's the whole thing. Like, it's like, how are these P2Ps going to happen? Who's the community? What's an ecosystem? Look at all the choices. So you're trying to bring that in and raise awareness, which is great. So I totally appreciate that. And hopefully, Gavin, what you're doing here, and we can have some panels focused on some things that maybe Brad, cross over some of the borders, because these jurisdictions do play a role. But what we're creating, and I think there's at least 3 countries right now on the speaker panel, is a global discourse. And then in that situation, the DAR makes more sense because it's being promoted by an international body, right, of people who promote, who agree on it. It's not limited to the jurisdictions, but it's enforceable in the local national jurisdictions. So then everyone else locally can take part. So does that make sense, Brad, to resonate with what you're doing there?
100%. But again, one of the things that I would advocate, and this is important for all of us, and it took me a while to do, is we have to almost step back a little bit, right? Because before we discuss what Bitcoin is, we have to kind of deal with, this idea of what blockchain and what cryptocurrency are, right? We have to define these things, and that's really a major focus, because they still don't understand. I'll give you an example, like even before one of the congressional hearings, they had to have, a pre-hearing where, basically they were taught a little bit about, blockchain in general, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be able to have a functional meeting. And so, again, if we're there, then, I like to use the term blockchain, right? And then we can get into what is blockchain, because I think there'd be people on here that would be pressed. I mean, is Hyperledger blockchain? Is a consortium of blockchain? Is, let's go down that road. Or what is decentralization, right? But what are we discussing? We're discussing definitions, right? And what is law?
Does getting to the first part then require the association, in your view, right?
I think it
Having a
revolves
common
both.
definition.
Yeah, no. In Canada, you're doing it the right way. Like the way I've always wanted to advocate for the BSV Blockchain Association in Canada. Actually, I put together a few different global roadmaps, and I've always had Canada as more of a consortium way of dealing with the government, whereas you bring in, public-private partners, businesses, enterprises, universities, individuals, and then you tie them along with, government agencies, and now you start to build that coalition, right? That's how you change the government in Canada, right? In the US, it's not the same. In the EU, it's not the same. In the UK, it's not the same. So each one of those areas has to be, that narrative and perspective you're discussing, right? Which is 100% what all of us are putting out there. It just has to be brought in the way that it can be received, right? But before we get to what is Bitcoin, and even in my enterprise discussions, You know, Sentinel node is the greatest detection tool on the planet. It mitigates the global detection time from 220 days to an instant, right? It actually, that's mitigating a cost of over $9 million average for any breach that goes beyond 30 days. But I can't say Bitcoin to a CISO or IT director or somebody like that. Why? Because, well, they probably paid $5 billion in ransomware over the last 10 years in
Yeah, yeah.
Bitcoin, so it makes their butt pucker. So you have to like also speak the right language, and I'm not saying that I have the right language or you're not using the right language, but you know, I
Well,
think
we're
we have to
finding
be
it together.
mindful. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have to be mindful about it, right? Especially
Because
track and trace.
yeah,
To give you the same example, right? But if I
that was a
just
good
say
one.
I'm,
Yeah.
yeah, if I just
Well,
say
look,
I can, you know, follow this across the value chain, and they're all on board. So
I'll give you an example that, and I know Gavin, you wanted to close out on this too, but just because Gavin is one of your guests too, so that we've been in dialogue off stage, so to speak. But in Alberta, so Alberta in Canada is the second westernmost province, and it has its own unique politics, let's just say. But there's several parties that are sort of forming to try to create some new views, and one of the platforms they're deliberating is the Citizen OS. Citizen OS is launched in Estonia. It doesn't have a blockchain backend. But the point is, what they're trying to do is create a parallel system to the government. And this is a threat to the
yeah,
government. The term is sedition, right? But at the same time, you're empowering people to have their voice heard, but you're using some kind of token. And if not some kind of ledger system that isn't a token, and how's that going to happen without being a threat to the
definitely.
existing system,
Well, it sounds like
right? So we're
we've got a lot on the table for a potential panel here for the NAR and the DAR and some potential people. So in summary, we got potentially Connor, Kurt, Brian Daugherty, Brett, BSV Panama for it, and then Michael Scott, Ian Grigg, Crypto Voyager, Cub, potentially against the DAR speakers potentially. So any last words before we motion that we close this down? Greg, it's great to have you up, man. I hope that you and I can connect again in real soon. And
I look forward to it, Gavin. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, brother.
yeah,
Great conversation.
seriously, thank you. And thank you, Brian, for coming up just on the whim like that. And it was perfect timing. Michael Scott did a poll and Michael, are you back up? If you are, chime in, but I'm not sure if you're there, but yeah, Michael Scott did a poll and basically the community was pretty split between the supporting this NAR and DAR and for it. And so that was just yesterday. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, let's get a panel going so we can start potentially discussing this more and learning about the pros and cons. So yeah. Brian, thank you. Any last words you want to chime in on before we wrap up here?
No, just really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to any of these type of discussions that
Yeah. I'll reach out to you to host to come on the panel when we set it up. And then it looks like you have a book I just saw on your X profile. So would you mind just sharing what that's about and you know how people can find it? And
Sure, it's available on Amazon, and Greg will have to tell me Immutable Books if that's available there as well. But it is the Bitcoin letters. It is really about the first year and a half or 2 years of doing a lot of the public policy work that I've done for the BSV Blockchain Association. A lot of the discussions I've had, there's some incredible diagrams and charts that you probably have not seen, and unless you've seen them, unless you've seen the book. But there's some great, narrative messaging, I think, in there. Great perspective at what we're up against, and please, if you can get a copy, get a copy. I think it's free on Kindle, so you can get a copy that way. And just do me a favor and leave a review for me if you read it. Good, bad, or indifferent. I appreciate them all.
all right, get a copy of Brian's book on Amazon there, Bitcoin Letters, and leave a review. Just make sure it's not 1 star. So, but, yeah, okay, thank you, Brian. So, all right, let's Mehl, Casey, you guys have any words of wisdom you want to share with us before we close? Casey's doing a thumbs up or a hand. Mila, maybe she went to sleep. It's super late in Austria right now. So, well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to motion we close. Michael, thanks for inspiring this space here today, Michael Scott. All right, and let's do it again. We'll reconvene, Michael, and we'll get a panel together and make this happen. All right, so all right, everybody. Thank you again. I'll see you at the top.